Hey, everybody, welcome. Glad that you are here with us tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So, let me bring on the opening music and we'll get started here. Yeah, here we go. The world-
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Hope that you're having a lovely Saturday. I heard the news about the boom and looked into it a little bit, and that inspired me to talk about something completely different, actually, that I'm going to talk about in my opening remarks tonight. But hey, do what we can. Do what we can. So the way we do this, I'm going to give my opening remarks, and then from there we'll do the roll call, and then I'll answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, you can do a super chat. Super chats are always appreciated. We're monetized now. But the best way, the absolute best way to send a question is to go to buymeacoffee.com. Gabrielle is sending her love. Very kind. We need more love in this world. But yes, absolute best way to send your question, is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. I'll read those questions first. Those are the best ways to send questions. We take questions. You can also do a Rumble rant. You can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. The best way is to go to buymeacoffee.com. In terms of announcements, a lot is happening now. If you want to register for our CPI National Training Program, we are having it in Chicago. We just put out the announcement on the website. From a drop to an ocean. We had a great CPI members meeting. That was really great. The Center for Political Innovation. This is the summer of CPI. Well, thank you, Brooklyn Stevens. And we are doing great as an organization. And we're having our national training school August 12th through 19th. We just have the announcement up on the website. You can register. It's going to be great. Our national convention will be going on at the same time. So register for summer program. We'll put that in the chat. We'd love to have you join us. It's going to be great. It's going to be tremendous in Chicago. So join us. I'll be hitting the road in July, and I'll be in Minneapolis. I'll be in Los Angeles. I'll be here in New York. We're having an event July 2nd. So the organization is always moving ahead and doing great stuff. Also, I went on Kim Iverson's show yesterday. We did a whole hour-long episode about my new book, Imperialism and Anti-Imperialism. And the episode has been very, very well received. A lot of great feedback on it. She's been posting clips of it all day. It was really, really great. So if you haven't gone to watch that, I would recommend watching. And I might show a couple clips from that episode here later tonight. I'll probably post the entire thing next week. So keep that in mind. Very exciting. And the new book is out. Please get a copy of the new book. It's everything you need to know about CPI and our mission. It's going to be good stuff. Good stuff as always. The Kim Iverson episode went really well. I did an episode with Academic Agent. I recorded that on Thursday, and that will be going up on Tuesday. So keep that in mind. when you wait for that. And it looks like I'm going to be on Truthwire on Monday. So that should be fun. And it looks like I'll be on with the Ron Paul Institute later next week. So we are just making our way around. There's another big show that I may be on. I just found out, fingers crossed, not confirmed as of yet. So we're making our way around. This new book is what everyone needs to read. It is just an introduction to everything that we're all about, anti-imperialism. And we're doing great. So, we do have a huge amount of momentum right now. The wind is in our sails, so to speak. CPI is on the move. So become a member of the Center for Political Innovation today. Get involved. Oh, Paul just recorded his audiobook of Do You Believe in Growth? That's great. That's great. Excellent. And I will be, hopefully, maybe we can cut that for the CPI YouTube channel. That's really, really great. Paul is a CPI member here in New York who's been doing great work. So yeah, CPI, the wind is in our sails at this time. I'm really, really excited about everything that we're doing. So if you're not a member already, become a member, get involved, join us at our 7-day national program, come to the events we're doing in July. We are marching ahead as an organization. Yeah, that's us. We're the Center for Political Innovation, and we are doing great work right now as an organization. I'm very, very excited about everything we've got going for us. And now is the time more than ever that we need to build an anti-imperialist movement right here in America. So get involved. Very, very exciting. And thank you. I don't know. Brooklyn Stevens is pointing out, yes, I was on Kim Iverson. I was on Academic Agent. That'll be premiering next week. I'm going on every show right now. What we are offering as an organization, our optimistic pro-growth anti-imperialism, that is really what the American people are looking for. So yeah, we're marching ahead. We are marching ahead. We are the winning team. So there you go. Now, as I said before, following our normal format for tonight, first the opening remarks, then from there the roll call, and then from there I will answer your questions. So if you do have a question for the second half of the show, best way to send it is to go to buymeacoffee.com. You can also do super chats. Super chats are always appreciated. You can do a Rumble rant. You can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22, whatever you want to do. But yeah, it is you all that make the second half of the show happen. So I'm hoping that you will use that power wisely. In the Spider-Man movie, they said, with great power comes great responsibility. As I said on a previous stream, I have watched that movie way more times than I ever intended to. So with great power comes great responsibility. Those of you that are watching this live, you have the power to ask me good questions. So ask me good questions. Get me talking in the second half of the show. All right. So the big news is that in Boston, there has been an explosion. And it took everyone by surprise. And I'll show you a couple clips of this explosion that happened in Boston. But the whole Boston area, people were, flooding the police with 911 calls, reporting a loud booming explosion. This is a radar of the area, right? Everything was fine. And then kabump. That was interesting, right? That was radar. And here's some local video of what happened. This is a video that somebody shot. This is like a home camera that somebody had, I guess, installed on their doorstep that happened to record this. Yeah, pretty loud. And now we've got this video, which I honestly have questions about. I think this is like a car camera video or something, or like a traffic video that claims to have captured what it was. So I don't know. This video looks a little, I don't know, but take a look at this. The story is now that they're going with is that this was a meteor that hit the Earth. A 3-foot wide meteor entered the atmosphere. And when it entered the atmosphere, it made a boom. And so now they've got video proof that it was a meteor. Take a look. See that? They're saying that, oh, look at that. It was a meteor. Yeah, I don't know about this, folks. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure I buy this. I hate to be conspiratorial. I'm not saying it was the Illuminati. I'm not saying that it was, some crazy thing. I'm just having a hard time thinking this was just a meteor. But maybe it was. I mean, who knows? However, many people pointed out something similar happened in South Carolina a couple weeks ago. And I don't know if you saw that, but Sabi Sobs was posting about how in South Carolina, there was a similar incident where there were like some loud explosions. And I guess this is the clip from the local news in South Carolina. And this was just on Thursday in South Carolina. So, there's that old expression that lightning never strikes twice. So do meteors hit the same country in the same week? But this is the local news. This is the local news from South Carolina on Thursday. And this is why people are getting a little bit conspiratorial and wondering what's going on, because this is also on the East Coast of the United States, South Carolina. We had another loud boom. Let me put it on.
People across the region say they were shaken and confused after that powerful boom echoed across the area tonight. Now, reports came in from as far as North Augusta to Darlington County. Tonight, the U.S. Geological Survey telling Watch Fox News that the noise wasn't caused by an earthquake. Instead, it was a sonic boom. Now, several viewers sending us videos from their homes that show the shaking that happened this evening. The U.S. Geological Survey says the recorded waves and eyewitness reports are consistent with a sonic boom. The 0.0 magnitude boom was detected almost 4 miles northeast of St. Andrews area of Richland County near the State Fire Academy.
So a sonic boom in South Carolina and a meteor hit Boston. Meanwhile, the United States is still at war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Meanwhile, our leaders are doing all kinds of experiments with weapons. And I don't know. I got questions about this. Not saying I buy it, but it could just be that. It could be that there was a sonic boom in South Carolina. What is a sonic boom anyway? I feel like I know what it is, but I don't really know what it is. What is a sonic boom? Tell me what a sonic boom is. A sonic boom is an explosive thunder-like sound created by shock waves when an object like a supersonic aircraft travels through the air faster than the speed of sound. So if this was a sonic boom, where was the aircraft in South Carolina that was flying faster than the speed of sound? I mean, wouldn't we know about that? I mean, don't we have air traffic controllers and NORAD and all of that? Wouldn't we know if there was an airplane flying faster than the speed of sound? So why is that a mystery? Isn't that odd? Isn't that an odd way of reporting this? Right? So this is a sonic boom, but they're not telling us where the plane is. Right? This is the South Carolina report. If this is a sonic boom, tell us where the plane is.
People across the region say they were shaken and confused after that powerful boom echoed across the area tonight. Now, reports came in from as far as North Augusta to Darlington County. Tonight, the U.S. Geological Survey telling Watch Fox News that the noise wasn't caused by an earthquake. Instead, it was a sonic boom. Now, several viewers sending us videos from their homes that show the shaking that happened this evening. The U.S. Geological Survey says the recorded waves in eyewitness reports are consistent with a sonic boom. The 0.0 magnitude boom was detected almost 4 miles northeast of St. Andrews area of Richland County near the State Fire Academy.
So if this was a sonic boom, why are they not telling us about the aircraft that made it? What's going on? Why are we, we are in the middle of a war with Iran. And so they dispatched a plane that went faster than the speed of sound in the middle of the war in South Carolina when the war is happening in the Middle East. What's going on? I'm having a hard time with this. So we have a sonic boom in South Carolina. We have a meteor hitting the earth. And that is happening in Boston. I'm getting a little nervous. Do you all remember? I don't know if you remember, but during the pandemic, when we were all on lockdown, I remember how there were constant fireworks going off. Constantly. It was just, you had your windows open in New York City and it was kaboom, 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 kaboom all day long. And later we found out that fireworks were being deposited on the streets of New York City, often with the insignia of the New York City Police Department on them. And it was some kind of weird psychological operation that fireworks were just being left around the streets during the pandemic. Do people remember this? It was very weird. But if you lived in a major city during the pandemic, there were just fireworks going on all the time. Pandemic fireworks. It was one of the strangest things. And it was just constant. The summer of the lockdowns in New York City, there was just you constantly heard the sound of fireworks. And a lot of people had conspiracy theories and questions about that because it just seemed odd. And that, that fireworks were being left around the city. And it was very, very, very odd. Here, let me put on, there was a local news report about it. This was June of 2020 from the local news in New York City about the fireworks. And it was just, it wasn't one little boom. It was constantly, you just had these explosions going on throughout the pandemic. Right. Here, we'll put the fireworks report.
Complaints of illegal fireworks have skyrocketed in the city. Later today, Brooklyn's borough president will discuss how to crack down on illegal fireworks. Since the beginning of this month, the city has received more than 1,700 311 complaints about illegal fireworks. It's more than 80 times as many complaints as it's got for the same period last year.
And it goes on till about 1 in the morning, or so, up till about 1 in the morning. It's loud and it's consistent. It's been happening every day for the past couple of weeks.
Brooklyn leads the boroughs with the most complaints. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams and City Council member Robert Cornegie are asking the city to use cure violence groups to respond to complaints. They also want law enforcement to track how the illegal fireworks are getting into the city.
Yeah, and Rolling Stone even ran an article at the time, why the fireworks conspiracy theories are so damn believable. And you read the Rolling Stone article, it was just so bizarre. And it was just around the clock, these fireworks were going off while we were in lockdown. That was pretty weird. There was something else pretty weird that happened in New York City. A car caught on fire on Wall Street. All right. And what was weird is they didn't report on it. It didn't hit the local news until the next day. And that's what was bizarre, right? So Wall Street is the center of the world economy. And it's been a target for terrorist bombs, many times. And I follow the news. I'm in touch with people that follow the news. And these people, somebody that I know messages me, "Oh my God, there's a car that caught on fire on Wall Street," and it seems like big news. And then we find out that it happened the night before. It didn't happen until. So why did it take so long to hit the press? I will put, this is the report, but it didn't happen. This is New York City. We got New York 24 hours a day. Generally, if something happens, it's on the news immediately afterwards. But for some reason, this didn't hit the press until, like almost 12 hours after it happened. And this was on Wall Street. I'll put that video on. This was on Wall Street. This was last week, the Wall Street fire.
It's like a scene out of a movie. A car engulfed in flames, exploding into a massive fireball in New York City. Whoa. Sending frantic pedestrians scrambling for safety.
2 Broadway and Stone Street putting a car on fire.
Thick black smoke smothered the intersection near Wall Street's famed Charging Bull statue.
There was a series of booms followed by a plume of smoke. And
Josh Crandall works in the area and described the chaos in the thick of rush hour Tuesday.
I didn't know what was going to happen next. Am I safe? Are those other people safe? Is there something bigger going on?
You can see this charge sign even 24 hours later, and over here where the fire burned through a car that the Metropolitan Transportation Authority tells us was one of their vehicles.
Video showing early stages of the fire, burning the front end and the scorched aftermath. Remarkably, fire officials say no one was injured in the massive fireball as they investigate what caused the stunning scene. Emily Ikeda, NBC News, New York.
We thank you for watching, and remember.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that there's a lot going on right now that we're not being told about, and there's a lot of these like weird coincidences happening all of a sudden. Car just happens to explode into flames on Wall Street on Tuesday. Sonic boom loudly shakes South Carolina, and now Boston is shaken up by a meteor. I'm asking questions. Why now? Why now? Why is all of this all of a sudden happening? I don't know what's going on, but it is weird to see all of this stuff happening at the same time. And it makes me, and there's always some little, oh, well, this was just a car that happened to catch on fire. And this was a sonic boom, even though we can't tell you about what plane was involved. And this was a meteor. Look at this little video. There's a white thing in the sky. See, it was a meteor. It was a meteor. But, I don't know. Maybe I am just too suspicious. I have just seen our government lie to us so much, and I am so distrustful of mainstream media that maybe I'm seeing things that aren't. Maybe there's nothing going on here. But in a way, this is just part of American culture, right? One thing that Americans love, UFOs. That is just a big part of American culture. UFOlogy, the space aliens, UFOs. The flying saucer thing is just a big part of American culture. And the flying saucer scare happened, in America. The flying saucer scare hit in 1947. And in 1947, World War II had just ended, and all over America, people started seeing UFOs in the sky. And that's the whole Area 51 and that whole thing. And so at the time, there was a bluegrass gospel band called the Buchanan Brothers, and they had a hit song, a gospel song, arguing that the flying saucers were actually a sign that the end times were coming. And I find that song to be oddly poetic, actually, and I will put it on. I'm not going to put on the original Buchanan Brothers version. I'll get hit with a copyright thing. This is just some people performing the classic American country gospel song, flying, pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. I'm going to put that on, because this is just part of Americana. Being suspicious of booms and things in the sky is just part of Americana. So here we go. think I will play a better version of that song where you can hear the lyrics better before I move on to the next topic. I am going to move on to a pretty heavy and somewhat unrelated topic after this, but I think there's another version of this song I can play where you can hear the lyrics a little bit better. Yeah, this is a version of the song I've played on here before. This is the songwriter Guy Forsyth performing that classic American sci-fi country gospel bluegrass song, Pray to the Lord When You See the Flying Saucers. So we'll put one more version of that song on, and after that I'll start talking about another topic related to Americana, actually. So here we go. If I could just download the video, we'll put on the Guy Forsyth version of that song. Then we'll move on to my slideshow for tonight, which is kind of random. I just called up Noah and I said, do you think I could do a slideshow on this? And he said, yeah, I think you can. So here we go. So first we're going to hear Guy Forsyth, and then after that, we'll move on to the next topic. So here we go. This is one more version of that song where you can hear the lyrics. This is in honor of the conspiracy aspect of what we're doing here and questioning the mainstream media when it comes to what they're telling us about UFOs and such, and not trusting them when they say it's a meteor or it's a sonic boom or whatever it is. Here we go.
I have a slide. You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It might be the coming of Judgment Day. It's a sign, there's no doubt of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friend, you better start to pray. When you see your saucer fly like you're coming through the sky, you should realize the price you'll have to pay. You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. Might be the coming of Judgment Day. Now many people think the saucers might be someone's foolish dream. Maybe they were sent down here from Mars. If you just stop and think, you realize just what it means. They're more than atom bombs or falling stars. And though the war may be through, there's secrets and trouble brewing, and those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. They're a terrifying sight as they fly on day and night. It's a warning that we'd better mend our ways. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. Might be the coming of the Judgment Day. Get your thoughts. Now many people think saucers might be someone's foolish dream. Maybe they were sent down here from Mars. If you just stop and think, you realize that's what it means. They're more than atom bombs or falling stars. And though the war may be through, there's this sense of trouble brewing, and those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. They're a terrifying sight as they fly on day and night. It's a warning that we better mend our ways. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. Might be the coming of the Judgment Day.
Yeah. So anyhow, since UFOs and UFO stuff is a big part of Americana, right? Because American media goes all over the world, and starting in the 1940s, people started seeing UFOs, and then Hollywood started making movies about little green men and Martians and all of that and War of the Worlds, because American culture goes all over the world, everybody around the world knows all about UFOs. Well, unfortunately, there's something else that everyone knows about all over the world. And it's true. People may know very little about the United States, but one thing that people around the world do know is that in America, at multiple times throughout U.S. history, we've had white guys who put on bed sheets and burn crosses and murder African Americans and others. The Ku Klux Klan is something about America that the whole world knows about. In fact, if you read the writings of the essays of the published writings of Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Vietnamese Communist Revolution, he lived in New York City. He was a cook in New York City in the 1920s. And that was at the time the Ku Klux Klan was very popular. And he wrote an essay for the socialist newspaper of Vietnam about the Ku Klux Klan because people in Vietnam were not familiar with it. One of Ho Chi Minh's early essays is about what is the Ku Klux Klan. Because we talk about American history on these streams and American politics with a very high level of understanding. And we understand things very, very well. You know, in my recent slideshow on Bonapartism, I talked about Woodrow Wilson and the Ku Klux Klan. So tonight, I thought I would just go over what is the Ku Klux Klan, and we'll just talk about the history of this racist organization that shows up about 4 times in American history. That is really, you could say the Ku Klux Klan is part of Americana, right? It's just part of American history. It's just part of American culture that we have seen over and over and over again. What is it? Where did it come from? So this is a slideshow I put together. The Ku Klux Klan, a recurring phenomenon in American history. The Ku Klux Klan, a recurring phenomenon in American history. So we're just going to go over the history of the Ku Klux Klan, and we're going to learn various things from its various incarnations, what the Ku Klux Klan meant in American history. So let's start with, first of all, we have to remember that the American Civil War, fought from 1860 to 1865, was really the second American Revolution. That the American Revolution was not complete because in the South we maintained slavery, human chattel slavery, which is feudalism, right? Human beings being owned by other people is generally not associated with capitalism. That's a holdover from feudalism, right? In Europe, they had serfdom, which is kind of semi-slavery. Prior to feudalism, you had blatant slavery, in the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, etc. And, in America, at the time America was founded, we had slavery as a big part of the economy. And the South of the United States was the cash crops, cotton, tobacco was being picked by enslaved persons. And slavery was something that kind of hung over U.S. society like a curse. At the time that the American Constitution was being written, it was a big point of disagreement between the founders of the United States. Many of the founders of the United States were slave owners, but, I believe Thomas Jefferson said he was morally opposed to slavery. So he freed all of his slaves at the time of his death. Now, people look at that and they say that's a little bit hypocritical, right? If you're really against slavery, wouldn't you get rid of all your slaves while you were still living? But then he would have lost all his power, right? Because he was really, really wealthy, and all of his power came from owning, thousands of human beings that worked on his fields and made money for him. And in fact, we now know Thomas Jefferson, not only did he have slaves that worked his plantations, he also, had a wife who was, or it wasn't a wife, he had a woman, a lover who was his slave, Sally Hemings. And he has, there are descendants of Thomas Jefferson who are African-American because of that. And George Washington never had any children, and he had the largest slave plantations of anybody in America. And he was the richest man in the 13 colonies. And slavery hung over the United States just like a curse, that in the northern parts of the United States, we had an attempt to build an industrial economy. You had Alexander Hamilton creating a national bank and building lighthouses, and loaning money to states to build lighthouses so we could have a rising economy. But in the South, we had an agrarian economy. And even though we won our independence from the British Empire really liked getting cheap cotton shipped into London from the American colonists. And as the British Empire began to expand, the textile industry became essential. The British Empire was supplying the world with cloth, and they needed cheap cotton picked by American slaves to grow their cloth. And so the British Empire became very big supporters of slavery in America. And so as America is growing as a country, there's a feeling that slavery is something that is hanging over our country like a curse. There are things that are starting to happen that are just showing that slavery is going to restrict the United States. We're not going to be able to have a prosperous, strong country with slavery. One thing that happens, for example, is that they pass the fugitive slave law that says that if a slave breaks free and goes to a non-slave state, that state is obligated to send them back to the South where they have to be enslaved. And all the new states that are coming into the country, they're increasingly being slave states. And the USA goes to war with Mexico and steals Texas and California from Mexico because the slave owners want more property, right? And I believe Abraham Lincoln called it the most unjust war that was ever fought when the USA stole Texas and California from Mexico so that the slave plantation owners could expand into Texas and have more property. There's many people in the Chicano parts of the southwestern United States. They say we didn't cross the border crossed us because they were already living there. And then the slave owners and the war with Mexico, the Mexican-American War, resulted in the USA expanding into the land of Spanish-speaking people, displacing them, stealing their land, stealing their property. The way Texas and California and New Mexico and Arizona were acquired was not democratic or fair or just. It was a war of plunder against Mexico. And slavery was just ruining everything. And the slave owners, their votes in the federal government were greatly overrepresented. For example, because of the fact that the Constitution says Black people constitute 3/5 of a human being, all of the slave owning states, their population was expanded, etc. And slavery was genocidal. It wasn't simply a matter of people owning other people. Angola and Louisiana. Louisiana was like a death camp. Any slave who was sent there was lucky to live 2 years there. I mean, they would just work people to death by the millions, and millions died in the Middle Passage, just entering, coming to the United States, and slavery was genocidal and murderous on a scale that is often kind of overlooked. And that's one of the wild things. They give us a big body count for communism killed this many people, and this many people died in the Holocaust. And then when they talk about slavery in the United States, they say, well, that was bad. But they don't give you a body count. And like the body count of just, crossing the Middle Passage in the Atlantic and bringing slaves to America, the body count was in the millions. And then the people being worked to death, and, the way slaves were killed for trying to escape. And I mean, slavery was a murderous, genocidal institution that hung over America like a curse. You couldn't have a free, prosperous country with something as barbaric and evil as slavery going on. But yet, the slave owners of the South, they were overrepresented in the federal government. So it was necessary to build a mass movement to oppose slavery. And there was a religious movement in America called the Second Great Awakening. And it was Christian pastors in the northern United States and the newly settled territories like Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois, having a mass religious movement of repentance in opposition to slavery. And I'm actually proud to say that my ancestor, Charles G. Finney, my mother's maiden name is Finney. My ancestor founded Oberlin College in Ohio. He was originally here in New York, and he refused to give communion to anyone who practiced slavery or was involved in the slave trade. So they ran him out of New York City to upstate New York, where he started baptizing people in the river. And then he moved out to Ohio, and that's my ancestor. And that's my ancestor. I'm very proud to be descended from the Second Great Awakening. And it was just a mass religious movement of repentance, and like the song Amazing Grace was written by John Newton, a slave trader who realized the evil of his ways and turned his ship around and took the black people on board back to Africa. And that the emphasis of the Second Great Awakening was on repentance, and it was repentance not just for individuals, but also for the country. It was like America needed to repent from slavery. Frederick Douglass, a former slave from the South, went on, speaking tours, agitating about the evils of slavery. You had the Underground Railroad where slaves were being freed, Harriet Tubman. You had a whole mass movement in opposition to slavery. And ultimately, John Brown did his raid on Harper's Ferry, which was an attempt to rise up against the government and oppose slavery. John Brown is the first American in history to be given the death penalty for treason because he attempted to launch an armed uprising against slavery. You had the Nat Turner slave revolt in Virginia, where Nat Turner, this African-American pastor, led slaves in Virginia to take up arms against the white people and against slavery. So there was a mass movement of thousands and thousands and thousands of people who felt that slavery was wrong. And even though the plantation owners were propped up by the British Empire and they had lots of money and they were tied in with Wall Street, New York City was a stronghold of pro-slavery sentiment because Wall Street insured slave cotton and slave exports from the South. And Wall Street was very heavily involved in the slave trade and slavery. New York City was a stronghold of pro-slavery sentiment with the Tammany Hall Democrats. Regardless, all across America, you had an abolitionist movement that was expanding. And the abolitionist movement increasingly became angry with how the slave states were imposing slavery on the rest of the country. There were abolitionists that wanted to completely abolish slavery, but then you also had a lot of people that maybe they felt like, okay, if the Southern people want to have slaves, that's fine, but don't make us participate with it. But the Fugitive Slave Act and demanding that the new states that come into the country be slave states, and increasingly the slave states were kind of demanding that the whole country kowtow and cooperate with their slavery. So in 1860, we had a historic presidential election. The 1860 presidential election was probably the most important election in all of American history because a new party, a third party, had been formed. America was a two-party country back then, and we had the Whigs and we had the Democrats. And the Democrats were the party started by Thomas Jefferson that were really pro-slavery, and the Whig Party was the kind of against slavery party. But enough people in the Republican Party were angry about slavery. They formed a new political party that was completely against slavery. And they found a lawyer from Illinois, which was a new state, a small town country lawyer who was known to fight for the poor and the downtrodden, named Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln ended up becoming the presidential candidate of the Republican Party. And Abraham Lincoln was a revolutionary. He was a populist. This is from the movie Lincoln in Illinois, which is a 1940s movie. But every single one of these words was said by Abraham Lincoln. None of this is fiction. And Abraham Lincoln condemned capitalism. He said that capitalists come together to fleece the people. He said labor is superior to capital. And, Abraham Lincoln, not only was he morally opposed to slavery, he was opposed to the oppression of workers, and he supported labor unions. And these are the actual words of Abraham Lincoln when he was debating a pro-slavery political opponent in 1858. This is Abraham Lincoln. These are the words from the Lincoln-Douglas debate that he gave. All right, we'll skip ahead.
Now, you heard the judge speak about our own labor conditions. As an American, I cannot be proud that such conditions exist. But as an American, I can ask, would any of the striking workers in the North elect to change places with the slaves in the South? Will they not rather say the remedy is in our hands? And still, as an American, I can say, thank God we live under a system by which men have the right to strike. I am not preaching rebellion. I don't have to. This country with its institutions belongs to the people who inhabit it. Whenever they shall grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it, or their revolutionary right to dismember or overthrow it. If the Founding Fathers gave us anything, they gave us that. The purpose of the Dred Scott decision is to make property and nothing but property of the Negro in all states of the Union. It is the old issue of human rights versus property rights. It is the eternal struggle between two principles. The one, the common right of humanity. The other, the divine right of kings. It is the same spirit which says, you toil and work and earn bread and I'll eat it. As a nation, we began by declaring all men are created equal. There was no mention of any exception to that rule in the Declaration of Independence. But we now practically read it, all men are created equal except Negroes. If we are to accept this doctrine of race or class discrimination, what is to stop us in future from decreeing all men are created equal except Negroes, foreigners, Catholics, Jews, or just poor people? That is the conclusion towards which the advocates of slavery are driving us. Let each state mind its own business, says Judge Douglas. Why stir up trouble? This is the complacent policy of indifference to evil. And that policy I cannot but hate. I hate it because of the monstrous injustice of slavery itself. I hate it because it deprives our republic of its just influence in the world, enables the enemies of free institutions everywhere to taunt us as hypocrites, causes the real friends of freedom to doubt our sincerity, and especially because it forces so many good men among ourselves into an open war with the very fundamentals of civil liberty, denying the good faith of the Declaration of Independence and insisting that there is no right principle of action but self-interest. In his final words tonight, the judge said that we can be the terror of the world. I don't think we want to be that. I think we would prefer to be the encouragement of the world, the proof that at last man is worthy to be free. But we shall provide no such encouragement unless we can establish our ability as a nation to live and grow. And we shall surely do neither if these states fail to remain united. There can be no distinction in the definition of liberty as between one section and another, one class and another, one race and another. A house divided against itself cannot stand. This government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free.
So Abraham Lincoln, he was a radical. He was a small town lawyer who opposed slavery, who defended labor unions, and he was a populist. And he was from the countryside. He wasn't from Virginia. He wasn't from New England. He was from Illinois, which was the Wild West back in those days, a new state, unsettled territory. And when he became the face of the Republican Party, this new political party, and he won the 1860 presidential election, it was a big deal. And Abraham Lincoln and his supporters, they had a secret society that they formed called the Wide Awakes. And the wide awakes were basically, it was a youth group for people in their teens and 20s who would protect Abraham Lincoln from being assassinated. They would defend Republican Party gatherings. They protected Abraham Lincoln. They had armed militias and parades. They also had secret handshakes and codes, and they were called the wide awakes. Now, some people say that woke comes from the wide awakes, but really what this gets down to is that this is just kind of how politics was back in the day, right? You know, religion was a really big deal, right? The Second Great Awakening was a religious movement, right? The main opposition to slavery was a religious movement. And, so, ritual and secret handshakes and things like that were just kind of how people did politics back then. And that's kind of important as we start talking later about the Ku Klux Klan. But like the Society of the Wide Awakes, this was this secret society of young people that, young men who learned to use guns and had secret handshakes to oppose slavery and secret codes. And like that was their symbol. It was an eye that is wide awake, like we're awakened, we're not asleep anymore. And they were the anti-slavery movement. And when the Civil War started, the wide awakes all enlisted in the army, to fight against slavery. And it was just, kind of how politics was. So when the Civil War happened, the Civil War was a revolution, and there's really no way around it. Harriet Tubman became the first woman to lead U.S. troops into battle, and she, led a militia that went along the Combahee River in South Carolina, liberating slave plantations. Joseph Wedemeyer, who was a Marxist, he led the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment, and he protected St. Louis, Missouri during the war. And Joseph Wedemeyer was a communist. And so it was basically a communist division of the U.S. Army that protected St. Louis, Missouri during the war. The Wide Awakes were involved in it as well. And during the war, the main Republican Party pro-Abraham Lincoln newspaper in New York City was the New York Tribune. And Karl Marx was hired as the London correspondent of the New York Tribune. And his essays, I have a book of his articles from the New York Tribune somewhere. It's up here. I mean, you read his writings, he was very, very pro-Lincoln, and he was Karl Marx. So the Civil War was a revolution. After the Civil War, the South was defeated. Slavery was outlawed by the constitutional amendments that were passed. And in the South, it was clear they were just going to try to not follow it. And they did crazy things, like they declared slaves to be apprentices. And they said, well, he's not a slave, he's an apprentice. And so it became clear that in order to prevent slavery, to really stop slavery, they would have to occupy the South. And that's what Reconstruction was. And Reconstruction was actually one of the most hopeful times in American history. Most of these states in the South didn't have public education, but it was during Reconstruction, after the slave owners were defeated, that they set up public schools in the South, and white and black people got to go to public schools and learn to read and write. And that was because of Reconstruction. There were land redistribution efforts, and they did redistribute to some degree or other the land of the plantation owners. And Reconstruction was a very, very hopeful moment in American history, where, free black people, and in some cases, low-income white people, were coming together. The slave owners had been defeated. The slave plantation owners were on the defensive. They were having their land redistributed. There were, labor unions being formed, and it was kind of a progressive moment. W.E.B. Du Bois' book, Black Reconstruction, is really the best history of this period in American history, Reconstruction. And that's where the Ku Klux Klan was formed. The Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1865 in Tennessee as a secret society of former Confederates. And in 1866, they got Nathan Bedford Forrest, a former Confederate general, to lead it. Basically, they engaged in primarily voter intimidation. At this time, there was a law, and it's still, on the books, that if you take up arms against the American government, if you engage in insurrection against the American government, you lose your voting rights. So if you had been a Confederate soldier, or if you'd been part of the government of the southern states that had seceded, you couldn't vote. So the voting rights of former Confederates were taken away. So this is why, if you go back to the 1860s, that's when you have your first black members of Congress, your first black state representatives, your first, it's way back then, because white people couldn't vote. Largely, white men who had been Confederate soldiers had lost their voting rights because they had taken up arms against the American government. Now, they eventually started getting their voting rights back in the 1870s, but for a long time, that any white people who participated in the Confederacy, they were not able to vote. And so largely the Republican Party was winning elections because the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln. The Democratic Party was in a very weak position. So what the Ku Klux Klan did was they engaged in voter intimidation. They basically threatened to kill black people who voted and intimidated black people who voted. And they targeted black people who were registering people to vote. They targeted the people they called radical Republicans that were in the South, trying to organize black people. And they were largely a terrorist organization that engaged in trying to roll back the efforts to empower black people after the Confederacy had been defeated. To some degree or other, they were Confederate soldiers who kept fighting, basically. But they wore bed sheets so they couldn't be identified. And they did a whole bunch of the secret society stuff, secret code names and all of that, and secret handshakes and stuff like that. And actually, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was their leader, he became kind of a profiteer. He started an insurance racket because the group, was all over the South, and Nathan Bedford Forrest was officially their leader. So he would go from town to businesses and say, hey, the Ku Klux Klan is burning a lot of stores down these days, and they're robbing a lot of people. But, if you make a nice donation to me, I can make sure that the Klan doesn't go after you. And that's a classic organized crime tactic, and that, to what degree or other is the Ku Klux Klan just organized crime? I mean, obviously, this is a group that is on a racist mission. Obviously, this is the group that believes the Confederacy was right, that rejects, the Union Army, rejects the overturning of slavery. But at the same time, to some degree or other, this is just kind of a criminal organization. And, they run an insurance racket. 1868, Ulysses S. Grant is elected president of the United States. And honestly, Ulysses S. Grant is really one of he's a very admirable figure in American history. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but, he was the leader of the Union Army during the Civil War, and he was elected president in 1868, and his autobiography is awesome. He talks about the Mexican-American War and how unjust it was. He talks about Native Americans and how they're being unfairly treated. He talks about, how evil the Confederacy was and about how bad the Ku Klux Klan was. The autobiography of Ulysses S. Grant is really great. I mean, what it really just gets down to is that this was a period where the American capitalist state was overturning remnants of feudalism. And, he was the leader of the Union Army during the Second American Revolution. And he won the election in 1868, promising to crack down on the Ku Klux Klan. He said, the Ku Klux Klan is out of control. We defeated the Confederates. We're going to crack down on them. And he became president. He won the election in 1868. And he then sent federal troops to crush the Ku Klux Klan. He passed the Ku Klux Klan Act, which is a law that is still on the books, which is a very interesting law. 470 Klan members were arrested, and the Klan was basically crushed. And by 1872, it didn't exist anymore. Now, what's interesting is Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was the Confederate general, who was the leader of the Ku Klux Klan and got rich off this insurance racket. He was called before Congress, and he denied being a member. He lied about being a member. He clearly was a member. And he had quit the Ku Klux Klan as soon as Ulysses S. Grant became president. He quit. He knew that they were going to be outlawed. And he said part of the reason he quit the Klan was that he couldn't control it, because in local areas, they would just kind of do whatever they wanted. And it wasn't really a central organization, even though he was nominally the leader of it for the whole South. Every local group, basically every little town or whatever, had 2 or 3 guys who put on bed sheets and were doing the Ku Klux Klan thing. And they were not taking orders from anybody. It was a very kind of regional, autonomous kind of group. And a lot of crimes were committed. I mean, thousands of people were murdered for trying to vote, right? A lot of intimidation, a lot of rape, a lot of torture, and a lot of murder was happening. And Nathan Bedford Forrest realized, as the boss of the Ku Klux Klan, he was going to be held responsible for it, largely. So he quit the Ku Klux Klan. He was called before Congress and said he had never been a member. Oh, I've never been a member. I don't know anything about it. He had gotten rich off the insurance racket. And towards the end of his life, Nathan Bedford Forrest even gave like some anti-racist statements and stuff. He didn't even want to be associated with it. He knew it was kind of an embarrassing, losing thing. It's kind of wild. But by 1872, the Ku Klux Klan had been crushed by federal troops. And the law that was used to crush it is the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which is a very interesting law. It made a conspiracy to deny people their civil rights a crime. Isn't that interesting? So basically, and I think this is great. I mean, but it's interesting. It is a federal law that if you get together and try to conspire to deny someone their civil rights, that's a crime. If someone, you try to prevent someone from voting, you try to prevent somebody from exercising their free speech, and you get together, with other people and say, we're going to prevent this person from exercising their civil rights, that's a crime. So I want to know, does this apply to government officials? Can the FBI, they conspired to deprive the Uhuru movement of their right to oppose war against Russia, right? And they conspired to violate their civil rights. So is that a crime? Can they be arrested? It is a federal crime to conspire to deny people their civil rights. It says that the federal government can send troops when a local government denies civil rights, which is also very interesting. So if a local government is denying people their right to free speech, denying people their right to vote, etc., the federal government has the right to send troops to keep them in line. I did not know that. Also says the president personally is authorized to send federal troops to crush violent conspiracies. That's also very interesting. So not even the federal government, but the president himself can say that there is a violent conspiracy going on, and he can send federal troops to crush it. And it allows the suspension of habeas corpus in areas where organized violence is impeding federal law enforcement. So basically, if federal law enforcement is trying to do something and there's too much violence going on, they can just start arresting people without charges, which is interesting. It's kind of scary from a civil liberties perspective, but it's interesting. And the final thing is it enables people to sue state and local governments for violating their civil rights. And that is the part of the Ku Klux Klan Act that is used the most to this day. Like discrimination. If the local government or state government discriminates, you can sue them. Right? You generally cannot sue the government, but it says you can sue state and local governments for violating your civil rights. And that is used very frequently right up to today in discrimination lawsuits, etc. So I found that to be very interesting. That all comes from the law used to crush the first Ku Klux Klan, the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Now, the first Ku Klux Klan was crushed by 1871, but copycat organizations sprung up all across the South, basically. And there was an organization called the Red Shirts. There was an organization called the Knights of the White Camellia that also wore the white hoods. And it was like every little southern area had its own Ku Klux Klan kind of group. And in 1877, the U.S. presidential election was contested. And you had the famous Compromise of 1877, where the Republican Party agreed to withdraw federal troops from the U.S. South. And when that happened, that's when Jim Crow segregation came into effect. Is when the federal troops were removed from the U.S. South, Jim Crow came into effect. And the Ku Klux Klan as an organization didn't exist at this time, but there were a lot of local vigilante groups that went around enforcing Jim Crow and preventing black people from voting and, intimidating people and et cetera. And there were some important shifts in American politics. So after 1877, when the Republican Party agreed to remove federal troops from the South, the Republican Party began becoming less and less radical. Originally, the Republican Party was a revolutionary party, right? Their slogan was free land, free labor, free men. They were opposed to slavery. And you had leaders like Thaddeus Stevens and others that were considered to be radical Republicans. But starting in the 1870s, they really started to become more and more conservative. 1890 was really the end of when you could be a radical Republican. In 1890, the Republican Party, there were some Republicans that wanted to push a law to protect the right of Black people to vote in the South, and the other Republicans wouldn't support it. And at that point, it became clear that if you were kind of anti-establishment, you couldn't be a Republican. So in 1891, the radical people within the Republican Party, the small farmers that were opposed to big business and had been opposed to slavery, the anti-war people, Mark Twain, the writer, he had the Anti-Imperialist League. The Free Soilers, the small farmers, the Anti-Imperialist League of Mark Twain, labor unions, they all quit the Republican Party and they founded the People's Party. And the People's Party were known as the Populists, and they were a huge political party that was against the Republicans and the Democrats. And they were originally an anti-racist party. And they said that, racism is a tool of the capitalists, and they were for the small farmers. They wanted to nationalize the railroads. They wanted to get rid of the gold standard and replace it with a silver standard. And they were kind of a left-wing political party. And, they wanted a national bank and the silver standard. They wanted public ownership of railroads. They wanted to redistribute land so all the land didn't end up in the hands of big agribusiness corporations. They were not socialists or communists, but they were anti-corporate, anti-big business, anti-trusts, anti-monopoly. And the People's Party originally was anti-racist, but gradually, especially in the South, because they had broken away from the Republican Party, and the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, the populists started learning that pushing racist buttons against the Republicans was a way to score points. And increasingly, they would say things like the Republicans are giving jobs, government jobs, to Black people, and those jobs could go to whites. And increasingly, the populists became more and more racist over the course of the 1890s. Until finally, William Jennings Bryan came along. And William Jennings Bryan was a populist who became a Democrat, and he was the Democrat candidate for president. And he brought the Populist Party into the Democratic Party. And the Populist Party dissolved, and it became part of the Democratic Party, and it was fully racist at that time. William Jennings Bryan. What year was he? William Jennings Bryan. He was the Democratic nominee in 1896, in 1900, and in 1908. He lost all three times, but he was a populist who became a Democrat, and he called out big business a lot. He was against World War I, and he was kind of a left-wing figure, but he was racist, and he brought the Populist Party into the Democrat Party. Now, around the time that the populist movement went into the Democratic Party, they started building Confederate monuments, and they started retelling the history of the Civil War. And they started basically telling poor white people that they were poor because slavery was abolished. Less than 2% of Southern white people owned slaves. It was a very small minority. And in fact, white workers in the South, their wages were very, very low compared to workers in the North. Why? Because they were competing with people who worked for free and got no pay, slaves. The Southern workers that were white were very, very impoverished. But starting around, 1890s or so, as the populists are merging into the Democratic Party starts putting out the Gone with the Wind narrative, saying that, during slavery, the whites had it really, really good. But the Republican Party betrayed the white man and abolished slavery and treated us so bad during Reconstruction. And, the novel Gone with the Wind that was made into a movie in the 1930s, that narrative that white people were all living in splendor and the Black people were content and happy as slaves until the darn Union Army and Abraham Lincoln messed it all up. That narrative started becoming popular because it served a political agenda. And they started building monuments to the Confederates. They started, honoring Confederate Day. They'd have big parades. And throughout the South, the mythology that the Confederacy was somehow good and that the white people of the South had benefited from the Confederacy, and the downfall, and the reason people in the South were poor was because slavery had been abolished. That narrative that Lincoln was a tyrant, that whole narrative started to get inculcated among poor white people in the South, because that was the narrative that served the Democrats in order to get elected. And what was interesting is the Democrats were kind of the left-wing party at the time, in that they were criticizing big business, etc. But at the same time, it came with a bunch of racism. So then 1905, a novel that was part of this this kind of thing was published. It was called The Klansman. It was published in 1905, and it portrayed the first Ku Klux Klan as, quote, the reincarnated souls of the old Klansmen of Scotland, rising up to save the life of a people. And it was propaganda, but it was basically a novel portrayed the Ku Klux Klan as romantic heroes who defended the white people during Reconstruction. It was a popular novel that was widely promoted to serve this kind of Democratic Party agenda of the idea the Republicans are bad and the Republicans are responsible for all your problems, and everything was good under slavery. And then you had an incident in Atlanta, Georgia in 1915. It was the lynching of Leo Frank. And this is a very strange incident. So Leo Frank was a Jewish factory owner who came to Atlanta. He had a factory, and one of his employees, a white woman who worked in his factory, and apparently the people who worked in his factory got paid very, very low wages, and it was a sweatshop. I mean, these people worked in very, very bad conditions, and this Jewish guy, who was not from there, he was from the North, a Jewish guy named Leo Frank, was the owner of the factory that paid these people very, very low wages and was kind of considered to be a pretty crooked, ruthless boss. He was working his employees badly, and he was an outsider. He wasn't from the South, and he was Jewish, right? And Jews were viewed as not white, and Jews were viewed as foreigners and untrustworthy, etc. One of his employees was a young white woman, a young teenage girl who worked in his factory, was raped and murdered. Very violently raped and murdered. And, now it's largely understood that he was innocent. I actually don't know if he was innocent or not. I don't know the details of the case a lot. Regardless, he was found guilty of raping and murdering one of his employees. And it was a pretty ugly case. I mean, the way the woman was killed was pretty horrendous. It was a pretty horrible crime. So he was sentenced to death for raping and murdering one of his employees. But then the governor of Georgia commuted his sentence to life in prison. And everyone was really, really angry about it because he was rich. He got his sentence commuted because he was rich. That's really the only reason. If he had not been very, very wealthy, and if he had not, rallied the Jewish community of America to, donate money and support him and all of that, there's no way in the world that somebody convicted of such a horrendous crime would not get the death penalty. This is back in the days where the death penalty was used very widely in the South, especially, but all over America, people were given the death penalty all the time. So Leo Frank, convicted of a very horrendous crime, he may have been innocent. Regardless, he's convicted of this very horrible crime, but he's well connected. He's got a lot of wealthy people supporting him and such. And so they commute him to life imprisonment instead of death. Well, everybody in Atlanta, is really mad about that, bought himself a pardon, basically. But he may have been innocent. So I'm not saying that he didn't deserve a pardon. Regardless, everyone in Atlanta is really mad about it. So they broke him out of jail and they lynched him. And he was killed very horrifically. It was pretty ugly. I mean, they ripped his body apart and they killed him in really, really horrible ways. It was a really, really ugly, ugly thing. But it was portrayed in the media and in the South as justice, right? As, okay, well, the governor pardoned him, so we're gonna kill him ourselves. And it was kind of viewed as kind of a populist uprising of the people, right? This guy murdered a poor white woman and bought himself a pardon, so we're gonna break into the jail and we're gonna hang him publicly and rip his body into pieces. And it was a really ugly lynching, but at the time it was viewed as just kind of rough justice. And it was in the atmosphere around the same time, same year, 1915. Woodrow Wilson released a full-length Hollywood movie. It's the first full-length Hollywood movie that was ever created. and it's called The Birth of a Nation. And it's actually based on the novel, The Klansman, right? The 1905 novel, The Klansman. They made it into a movie. They called the movie The Birth of a Nation. And it's a propaganda film. And the words of President Woodrow Wilson are shown on the screen as captions. And it portrays, it's the story that everything was great in the South. And then Abraham Lincoln and the Union Army messed it all up. And then it was horrible and all the white people were being oppressed. But then, and they play Wagner's, what do you call it? Wagner's Flight of the Valkyries, dun 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 dun, you know, and the Klan rides in to save the day. What I think is interesting about the film Birth of a Nation, there's many interesting things about it. One thing is the word that it uses for white people in the film is Aryan. And keep in mind, this is 1915. This is way before Hitler. This is way before World War. This is before World War I. The USA even got involved in World War I, right? But the word that they use, they don't say white person. They say Aryan, which is like the Nazi word, right? And after this Hollywood movie is released, it's shown all over the country. And, you know, there's many theaters where, you know, people watch the film and they're just so fired up. You know, people have never seen a movie before, right? You know, I mean, and you have to remember, like, you know, there's a famous story of like the first movie that they made of a train, right? They filmed, you know, it's one of the first like films of Thomas Edison. I think he filmed a train. And he filmed the train and the people were sitting in the movie theater and they're watching the train and they got up and they ran out because they're afraid the train was going to hit them. And you think that's hilarious. Like, how could, you know, people think that the train was going to hit them? You have to remember they'd never seen a movie before, a moving picture. And imagine you've never seen in your life a moving screen, a moving image, and you're sitting there and then someone has a screen and it shows a train coming at you and people jumped up and ran out because you know, the power. Nowadays, we've developed kind of a tolerance, right? You're watching me on a screen right now. And when you see things on a screen, it doesn't impact you as much. But this is at a time, 1915, where people had never seen a moving picture before. So if you show people 2.5 hours of propaganda about, you know, black men raping white women and all of that, people are going to be pumped up. And after watching The Birth of a Nation, there were many instances where people were so fired up after watching the movie, they just went and found the nearest black person they could find and killed them. I mean, it's horrendous. But, you know, this was very, very potent propaganda that they made, right? You know, I mean, people tell the story a couple years later, you know, after the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks made a movie called The Battleship Potemkin. And they sent it all over the world as, you know, to promote the Russian Revolution. And there were a couple people that died of heart attacks watching the Battleship Potemkin because there's a lot of epic scenes in the Battleship Potemkin, right? You know, there's a scene where, like, you know, there's a massacre of the workers and the baby carriage like rolls down the staircase. And people were so moved by this movie that they had a heart attack in the theater. You have to remember, movies are a high level of emotional impact, right? They impact people in a way that, you know, that other art forms didn't. They have a lot more power. And, you know, to make a movie that promoted racism and demonized black people and glorified the Ku Klux Klan, that was really, really powerful propaganda. And it served Woodrow Wilson and the Democratic Party. So after they made this movie, the Birth of a Nation, which Woodrow Wilson screened at the White House, and it was just part of the Democratic Party's, you know, propaganda, they refounded a new organization called the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and it was founded in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It was this organization that was founded. Now, the second Ku Klux Klan that was founded in 1915, it was primarily a Midwestern organization, which is interesting. You think of the KKK as being from the South, but in the South, they had Jim Crow already. And largely in the South, they didn't really need to do the Ku Klux Klan thing. The people in the South were already voting for the Democrats, right? And they already had Jim Crow segregation. It was largely a Midwestern thing. It was in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Kentucky and Michigan and places like that. That's where the Ku Klux Klan was largely based. And it was rural farmers who had been Republicans joining the Democrats, right? Because the Democrats were the party of the urban political machines and the party of the South. But the Republicans were the party of rural folks, farmers, and people in the Midwest, those free soilers, right? Free land, free labor, free men. So this was a way Woodrow Wilson could get Midwestern Protestant farmers to join the Democratic Party. And one of the big things that the Ku Klux Klan did was they got prohibition passed because Catholics drink alcohol. But rural Protestants were largely Methodists and Presbyterians, and they were in, religious groups that said one should not drink alcohol. And so the Ku Klux Klan, one of the organizations they started was called the Anti-Saloon League. And in 1919, it became illegal to drink alcohol in America. We had prohibition, and that was largely because of the Ku Klux Klan. The bulk of Ku Klux Klan literature demonized Roman Catholics. And that is a really hard thing to imagine, right? You think of the KKK as being anti-black, but that was just kind of assumed at the time, right? White people, it was assumed you hated black people. Most of the literature of the KKK demonized Roman Catholics because there was a wave of Irish, Italian, and Eastern European immigrants coming into the country. And the feeling was that Roman Catholics were not real Christians and that they were loyal to a foreign government. They were loyal to the Vatican. Another thing which is very interesting is that the Catholic Church opposes birth control. And the Ku Klux Klan believed in birth control. Again, that doesn't match what we think about them. We think of them as conservatives. But in fact, there was a member of the Ku Klux Klan on the national board of the Birth Control League. Lothrop Stoddard was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and he was one of the main sponsors of the Birth Control League. And the Ku Klux Klan promoted eugenics, and they believed in birth control. And they argued that Roman Catholics opposed birth control because they were trying to come to America and breed so much that they would outvote the American people, and then America would be conquered by the Vatican. And that was the conspiracy theory that they largely promoted, is the Catholics are coming into America, they don't believe in birth control, and they're all going to have a bunch of kids, and then pretty soon all of us white Protestants will be outvoted, and America will be taken over by the Catholic Church. And that was a lot of their propaganda that they put out, which is very, very interesting, right? That, again, that doesn't exactly match what we think about them, but they were anti-birth control, or they were pro-birth control, and the Catholic Church was against it, and that was one of their arguments against the Catholic Church. Al Smith was the leader of the Democratic Party of New York City, and he was Roman Catholic. And I remember my grandmother who died, I remember she would always tell me her first political memory was in 1928 when she was a small child. They had a presidential election and she was a small child, and she told all of her classmates, don't vote for Al Smith. He's a Catholic and Catholics are bad. And there was a lot of hatred for Catholics at this time. Catholics were considered to be foreign, subversive, and, and the KKK literature said that they all have diseases, that they're all drunks, and they're drunk and they're bringing disease from these foreign countries into the country. And they don't believe in right and wrong, and they're breeding like rabbits. They're having a whole bunch of kids, and it was demonizing Catholics. Now there were 8 to 11 million members of the Ku Klux Klan in this time period, which is kind of hard to imagine. 8 to 11 million members. That's a lot of members for any organization to have. 8 to 11 million members of the organization. And unlike the original Ku Klux Klan, it was a centralized organization. It was a multi-level marketing scheme. And the way it worked is if you joined the Ku Klux Klan, every person that you recruited, you got to keep a percentage of their membership dues, right? You had to pay certain membership dues. And then if you recruited people, they then paid membership dues, and you got a percentage of their membership dues. And so the people at the top of the Ku Klux Klan were millionaires many, many, many times over. And so it was like everyone who was in the Klan wanted to recruit more people to the Klan so they could keep money. And people say it was really the first multi-level marketing scheme in American history, where every Klan member was wanting to recruit as many other Klan members, and that they kind of shook you down. Is what they were infamous for. After you joined, you thought, okay, it's only $10 to join, but then you have to buy, you can't just wear your bed sheets, you have to buy their robe, and then you have to buy this, and you have to buy that. And you're constantly being shaken down for money. And that money then gets passed up the food chain, and a lot of money. The people at the top were making millions and millions of dollars. And they would do all kinds of crazy things. They had carnivals. They tended to have swords, they would use swords, and they had very elaborate ceremonies that they would do for all kinds of things. And, it'd be like, back then there was no television, right? And I remember people telling me that, back in the day, before television was invented, the Tuesday night card game in a small town was a really big deal. And think about it. There's no TV, right? And you're in a small town. There's not much to do. So who you play cards with on Tuesday night is a really big deal. And it's what everyone talks about for the rest of the week because there's not that much going on. And in small town America, being a member of the Ku Klux Klan meant you got to go to a lodge with other Klansmen and play cards, or I guess maybe they didn't believe in cards because they were evangelical and very strict Protestants, but you got to know other people in the group. And then there were always these very elaborate rituals and ceremonies. And it was something to do. And it was very, very elaborate. And the Klan was infamous for engaging in theatrical acts of terrorism. That they would if there was a political figure who they disagreed with. There's a story of when a big baseball game was happening in some city, there was some politician who had opposed them or did something they didn't like. And so, thousands of people are coming to the big baseball game. And then all of a sudden there's a big row of guys in white sheets and they abduct the politician and they take him somewhere and beat him up. And there was a lot of stuff like that they would go to places where a lot of people would see them. And they would make kind of public appearances in their white sheets and threaten and intimidate people. And that people joined the Ku Klux Klan because they felt like they were joining some kind of secret society that was very powerful. And that the Klan, part of its image was that people, that they advertised themselves as a group that engaged in violence. Right? They were the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And the idea was that that we're this secret order that is protecting America and protecting white Protestant America from the Catholics and the Jews and the black people. And they would, go after people and target people. They would burn crosses. They would, engage in intimidation and very public acts of terrorism. And it was something that people would get involved with because they thought they were joining some kind of romantic secret society or something like that. And how many people were killed? I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of people were killed. You have to keep in mind, though, lynching in the South was largely something that went on regardless of the Klan. They were involved in it, but it was going on long before the Klan was reestablished. The lynching, the horror of lynching in America, of, hanging people and mutilating their bodies and all of that was going on. It went on before they were reestablished. That was just part of the Jim Crow order in the South. They believed in it, they promoted it, and they certainly participated. But it wasn't necessarily their thing exactly. This was, and how many people were killed by this organization? And it was just part of American society. And around 1915, it started up into the 1920s. And there was a reaction to it, right? And people fought back. The African Blood Brotherhood was formed in 1919 to teach armed self-defense to black people against the Ku Klux Klan. And in fact, the African Blood Brotherhood merged into the Communist Party at the 1922 convention. The leader of the African Blood Brotherhood was Harry Haywood, who I quote in my book, Mystical Stalinism. I actually quote Harry Haywood, and he talks about what it was like to be in the African Blood Brotherhood, why the African Blood Brotherhood merged into the Communist Party. Harry Haywood, he wrote an autobiography called Black Bolshevik that I quote in this book, Mystical Stalinism. And it was basically, he had this armed group that trained black people to engage in armed self-defense against the KKK, and they merged into the Communist Party. In addition to that, you had something called the Red Knights, or the Knights of the Flaming Circle, that were formed in Ohio. And it was, and this is so wild. This shows you that there's an element of organized crime in all of this. So one of the things that the Ku Klux Klan did is they went after moonshiners, people who made whiskey, because they thought alcohol was sinful and they thought alcohol was not right. They were Protestants, and there were gangs of Roman Catholics who sold whiskey, and they were called moonshiners. And in West Virginia, a lot of people had stills where they made whiskey up in the mountains, and a lot of them were Roman Catholics because Protestants didn't drink back in these days. So the Ku Klux Klan would harass the moonshiners. So the moonshiners formed their own secret society called the Knights of the Flaming Circle. And they would fight the Klan. and they fought the Klan. And again, to what degree or other are both of these just gangs? Right. I mean, this is, these guys are making, they're engaged in doing something illegal, making illegal alcohol, illegal liquor, and the Klan is engaged in illegal activities. This is two gangs fighting each other, basically. The Moonshiners had their own secret society to fight the Klan. And then in 1923, the Ku Klux Klan split into two organizations. There was a disagreement, probably over the money, the millions of dollars that were trickling to the top. And so one of the groups was based in the South and the other was based in Indiana. And the two groups, existed, and they both had the copyright. They took each other to court over the copyright of the Ku Klux Klan, etc. 1924, and I've talked about this before because it's a moment in American history that just kind of blows your mind. 1924, the Democratic National Convention was held in New York City. And it is the longest national convention of a major party in American history. It went on for 13 days because the Ku Klux Klan and the rest of the Democratic Party could not agree. The anti-Klan Democrats, the urban political machines, wanted to nominate Al Smith, whereas the Ku Klux Klan wanted to nominate William McAdoo. And neither side could agree. And it went on for 13 days. And the Democratic National Convention could not end. And there was loads of violence, people, getting into fist fights and et cetera. And every night as people were leaving Madison Square Garden, where the convention was held, there would be burning crosses across the river in New Jersey. And people called it the Klan Bake because it was a very hot summer. And for 13 days, the Democratic National Convention just kept going because they couldn't agree on who to nominate for president. And ultimately, they did reach a compromise. The candidate in 1924 for the Democratic Party was John W. Davis, who was viewed as a compromise. But it took them 13 days. And at that point, the Ku Klux Klan had too much power. They could hold a major political party hostage. And a major party couldn't finish its convention because there was too much infighting. And this secret society, and, many delegates were members of the Klan, but no one could tell who was in the Klan and who wasn't. It was a secret society. As a result of that, the Democratic Party was held hostage. So in 1925, the following year, the leader of the Indiana Ku Klux Klan was convicted of a really horrendous crime of murdering this woman, Madge Oberholzer. And I mean, you can look at this. And as I said the other night when I talked about this, Madge Oberholzer, I mean, it's a really horrendous crime. You look at the details of what was done to her. It was really, really horrible. No question about it. But the Klan killed people all the time. But they killed a beautiful white woman who was, engaging in literacy, volunteering, teaching people to read. That went too far. And the leader of the Indiana Ku Klux Klan was convicted of this murder. And at the trial, they brought all of his buddies in the leadership of the Ku Klux Klan to the stand. And it turned out the Klan were a bunch of hypocrites. They were promoting outlawing alcohol, and they were having wild drinking parties. They were promoting the traditional family, and they were, abducting women off the street and raping them. And, the Klan's reputation significantly decreased. And the murder of Madge Oberholzer largely destroyed the Ku Klux Klan as a national phenomenon. In 1923, they'd been able to bring 100,000 people to Washington, D.C. to have a march against Christopher Columbus, a huge, huge rally. But by 1927, they were down to maybe a few thousand members, maybe 100,000 members in the whole country. They had gone from millions to hundreds of thousands, which is a significant loss. They were kind of seen as discredited on the national stage. What it was that there was a division in the ruling class, and Woodrow Wilson, representing the New England Eastern establishment, the Rockefellers, they basically had decided that they wanted to use the Ku Klux Klan as a mechanism, as kind of a Bonapartist counter gang to assert their power. And it got out of their control. And the society in the 1920s, we were having a booming economy. The U.S. economy was much more stable, and so they didn't need them. And so the Ku Klux Klan, and they had held a major political party, the Democrats, hostage. And so the establishment kind of circled their wagons, and they said, we're done with the Ku Klux Klan thing. We're done with the Ku Klux Klan thing. They publicized their murder of Madge Oberholzer. They did a lot of negative stories that said true things about the guys, leading the Klan being, drunks and, using the dues money and being cynical and all of that. And so the Klan kind of was discredited by the late 1920s. They still kept going. But in the 1930s, there was a huge, huge fascist movement in America. But the Klan was really not part of it because the Klan hated Catholics. This is very interesting. But, Adolf Hitler was a Roman Catholic, and Benito Mussolini was a Roman Catholic. And that in America, the fascist groups that were sympathizers with Hitler and Mussolini, they largely were led by Roman Catholics. Now, not always. There were some exceptions, but the Klan hated Catholics. The Klan's entire reputation was based on hating Catholics. So, they really couldn't be, they were kind of left out of fascism in America because fascism was largely Catholic. And the big fascist in the 1930s was Father Coughlin, the radio priest. And he was a Roman Catholic priest in Michigan. And the Klan had actually burned his church when he first set it up. And he was a Roman Catholic who admired Hitler, Father Coughlin. And he was and he gave these sermons on the radio that were sponsored by General Motors, in which he ranted against communism and he ranted against Jews and he ranted, but he was largely, the Klan, you couldn't be associated with him if you were in the Klan because the Klan hated Catholics. And Father Coughlin, it's interesting. You listen to his sermons. They start out usually by kind of condemning capitalism and saying that capitalism is bad, which is interesting because now we don't think of right-wing people as being against capitalism. But his sermons were largely, he would condemn capitalism and talk about how, people are inhuman and cruel to each other and they don't care about each other. Right. And he would, preach against capitalism as, and unemployment and all the bad things about capitalism. But then he would start ranting against the communists and how the communists are the worst thing that ever existed. And we got to kill the dirty Reds and they're all Jews and the Jewish communists are going to destroy America and all this. And then he would end in this kind of peaceful, happy, and we should all come together and listen to Jesus and follow the Bible. It's very, very weird, Father Coughlin's rhetoric. And eventually, when World War II started, the Pope took him off the airwaves because he was, a bad PR for the Catholic Church. But I'll just show you a clip of him ranting about the Federal Reserve, Father Coughlin. And he would talk about the Illuminati. And that was kind of the way fascists talked back then, was that they would rant against capitalism, but then, after finishing with how bad capitalism was, the dirty communists are the worst ones and got to kill the Reds. And then, we're going to, love each other and have goodness for the nation or something like that. Here's a clip of Father Coughlin talking about the Federal Reserve.
There is written in the Constitution of the United States that Congress has the right to coin, issue, and regulate the value of money. That's good Americanism, and it's good enough for me. Every politician today in the Democratic or Republican ranks who sits upon one of the thrones of the mighty doesn't believe in that part of the Constitution. They don't want to believe in that part of the Constitution. They believe that the Federal Reserve Bank has the right to coin and regulate the value of money. They're not even Americans, these so-called Democrats and Republicans. And so, Mr. Roosevelt, who was very loquacious in 1933 about driving the money changers out of the temple, is now bent upon another policy. I think driving the workmen out of decent annual wages. As I come before you today, I I wish to leave this thought with you, that in each congressional district here in Illinois, we will endorse a candidate who can rise above his party and puts patriotism first. He may be a Democrat or a Republican or whatnot, but we're through with the sham battle of politicians, and now we're on our own. Therefore, under your congressional district presidents, form your battalions, take up the shield of your defense, unsheathe the sword of your truth, and carry on in Illinois so that the communists on the one hand cannot scourge us, and that the modern capitalists on the other cannot plague us.
Yeah. There at the end, he condemns both the communists and the capitalists, right? And he was the big fascist in America in the 1930s. And he was Catholic. There was another guy named William Dudley Pelley. And William Dudley Pelley was a screenwriter in Hollywood who started his own religion. And he said he had a vision. He wrote a book called he had a vision, and he wrote this essay called 7 Minutes in Eternity. And he had gone to the other side and met God and Jesus, and they told him that reincarnation existed and that all the different races are different stages in reincarnation, and whites are the highest stage. And he started his own group called the Silver Legion of America. Now, the Ku Klux Klan was not going to join any group like that, right? Because it's not Christian, right? He started his own religion. And, William Dudley Pelley, he incorporated Buddhist practices into his religion. And, he had a whole religious group that he started. It was kind of mystical or whatever. And it was, racist and white supremacist, but they were not going to be involved with that. And the Ku Klux Klan, they were for white Protestants, and they had been largely discredited after the murder of Madge Oberholzer. But they still existed throughout the 1930s, but they didn't have anywhere near the power and influence they had once had. And they were kind of, in terms of American politics, the far right energy was usurped by fascists, and fascists were largely at least friendly to Roman Catholics, if not Roman Catholic. And they took a back seat. The far right politics in America had changed. 1930s far right politics is very, very different. And then people say that really the nail in the coffin during World War II, Superman, was a radio show that everybody listened to. There was no television, there was radio. They had the radio adventures of Superman. And Superman started fighting the Ku Klux Klan on the radio show. And the idea was the Ku Klux Klan was preaching racism, just like the Nazis. And so the Klan were un-American. And by preaching racism, they were dividing the American people who should be united to fight Hitler. They were dividing them on the basis of race. And so the FBI started giving the actual secret code words of the Ku Klux Klan to the Superman radio writers. This is a story that's been widely told. The FBI basically met with the Superman radio writers and gave them all the secret handshakes and passcodes, the actual secret handshakes and passcodes of the Klan. And so all the people that were in the Klan suddenly felt really, really embarrassed because everybody knew all their secrets, and that they would hear their kids outside pretending to be Superman, and they would say all their secret passwords and shit. And so that was the Ku Klux Klan just felt humiliated as an organization because basically everyone knew all their secret code words and stuff. And they, for example, one of the big secrets of the Klan was that that if you met somebody who was who you thought might be in the Klan, you would say, "Do you know Mr. Ayak?" And that stood for Ayak was AYAK, where are you a Klansman, right? And then the other person would say, "Yes, I know Mr. Akai," and Akai stood for a Klansman I am, right? Secret club, right? Well, it was their secret password, right? Well, when they did that on the Superman show, right? And the bad guys on the Superman show are saying to each other, "Do you know Mr. Ayak?" "Why, yes, I know Mr. Akai." And everyone knows their secret code, right? And like kids are doing it when they're outside. It was embarrassing, and people just quit the Klan in droves. It was considered. It was at that point, their membership was largely in Appalachia and in West Virginia, in Kentucky, and places like that. It had stopped being a thing in a lot of areas. It was largely an Appalachian phenomenon, and at that point, it was largely discredited, and people just kind of stopped doing it. And the second Ku Klux Klan, they fizzled out. It's one of those things where there's no official end date for the second Ku Klux Klan. They lost credibility in 1926, 1927. People were not interested in them after the murder of Madge Oberholzer, but they still kept going. It's one of these things that people did. But during World War II, it was pretty much defunct. After the Superman thing, it was pretty much over. So then you have the third Ku Klux Klan. The third Ku Klux Klan is a completely different formation. And the third Ku Klux Klan is a number of different groups that were formed in the South, right? We're back to the South, right? The Klan started in the South in Tennessee. Then it became largely a Midwestern thing, the second one. And then it starts up again in the South in the 1950s as a way to oppose the civil rights movement. And that's really what was happening. The civil rights movement was happening. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had the Montgomery bus boycott, 1955, I believe. You had, the lunch counter sit-ins, and all over every summer, thousands and thousands of young white students would join the local black population, and there would be civil rights protests. And you had the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and you had the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and you had civil rights activism, civil disobedience happening all over the South to demand that black people have the right to vote, to demand that black people have the right to eat in restaurants. It was a big thing. And obviously, if you're a Southern racist, you don't like that. And the most famous Southern racist organization is the Ku Klux Klan. So in the 50s, to oppose the civil rights movement, you have a number of new Ku Klux Klan groups that are formed. The first one was formed by Eldon Edwards, and it was called the U.S. Klans. And then the second one was formed in 1961, and it was an attempt to get, like, a lot of cities just formed their own Ku Klux Klan. A lot of like Southern police departments that didn't like the civil rights movement, that wanted to intimidate black people that were involved in civil rights activism. They formed their own little Ku Klux Klan club or whatever. And so then in 1961, Robert Shelton tried to form one national organization called the United Klans of America. And this guy, Robert Shelton, formed this group. And this is a group that is responsible. It has been found responsible for the death of a number of Americans in court. 1963, they blew up the 16th Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. It was a church that I guess had been involved in the civil rights movement, and they didn't like it. And I will show you that they killed these three little girls. It was just, you can't think of anything less. Just unbelievable. These three little girls. All of them were, girls, children were murdered by the United Klans of America. They just blew up this church, and they killed these three girls in Alabama. It's just a horrendous hate crime, because they were mad that this church had been involved in the civil rights movement, and they bombed a black church and killed 4 members. You say Baptist or Protestant? Yes, that is correct. But the Klan hated black people, and it was a black church, right? Churches were segregated, and this was a black church that had been involved in organizing for civil rights, so they blew it up. They also were responsible for the murder of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwimmer. These were 3 guys who went down to Mississippi. All 3 of them were Jewish guys that went down to Mississippi to be involved in supporting the civil rights movement. And they were abducted and murdered, brutally murdered. They also murdered Viola Luzo in 1965. And she was a young white woman who was from the North, and she was involved in civil rights activism. And she went down to the South, and they decided they wanted to make an example out of her and intimidate white people from getting involved in civil rights activism. So they killed her. And she was brutally murdered as well. And I can put her image on the screen if you'd like. It was a horrific I mean, I don't know what more to say about it. I mean, it was a horrific incident. I mean, and she was murdered, and the United Klans of America was proven to have been involved in her murder as well. And that, just a young white woman was involved in civil rights organizing, and got abducted and killed by the Klan for doing it. So I mean, the United Klans of America was a very violent organization. But the reason that they did what they did was there was a lot of local government in the South that supported them. A lot of local police departments, a lot of state police. Governor George Wallace of Alabama, his state police established a relationship with the Ku Klux Klan of Alabama, and the same in Mississippi, and a lot. And there was the United Klans of America led by Robert Shelton, but a lot of these groups had nothing to do with any local thing. It was just in a lot of southern towns, they didn't want the black people voting. They didn't want to follow civil rights laws. So the local police department, 4 or 5 of their members put on sheets and went and did illegal things that they couldn't do when they were wearing a policeman's uniform necessarily, right? A lot of it was just an attempt to intimidate, murder, and kill people involved in the civil rights movement. And wearing white sheets and burning crosses was just kind of, it was part of the imagery. Everybody knew what that meant. Right. It was a symbol that, all over the world, people know that in America, we have this group of people that wear white sheets and burn crosses and kill black people. And so by doing that, they were sending a message, right? It was that they were trying to suppress the civil rights movement. And it was almost, you can almost say it's similar to how people say that Antifa is not an organization, right? There's just anyone could put on a black mask and say they're Antifa. Well, anybody could put on a sheet and burn a cross and say they're in the Klan. But it was a way that with your crime, if you committed a hate crime or if you did something, you were sending a message that I'm a racist. You're saying I'm a racist. I don't like, I'm doing this for racial reasons. It was a way to send a message when you committed your hate crime. And so Congress investigated the Ku Klux Klan in 1965. And this is actually interesting. The House Un-American Activities Committee was the congressional body formed to investigate the Communist Party. And it was Martin Dies, who was the member of Congress, who investigated Roosevelt for his ties to the Communist Party. They called it the Dies Committee. After World War II, that's when Joe McCarthy emerged, and they started calling it the House Un-American Activities Committee. And Joe McCarthy, he wasn't on it, but he would, bring people before it. And they investigated communism in Hollywood. They investigated people in the State Department for communism. Well, in the 1960s, the House Un-American Activities Committee was largely hated. It was considered to be an unpopular group. People, they had Operation Abolition, where, the liberals were trying to abolish it. And when they went to Berkeley, California to have their hearings, the people disrupted it. I wonder if I can show a clip of that. The House Un-American Activities Committee became very, very unpopular. And so as a way to kind of help their image, the House Un-American Activities Committee started investigating the Klan. They said, okay, we investigate communists, we investigate peace activists, we investigate the civil rights movement. But now to show that we're balanced, we're going to investigate the Klan. And that was an attempt for the House Un-American Activities Committee to maintain its credibility. Let me see if I can find a clip. Of the House Un-American Activities Committee became widely unpopular, and it didn't ultimately dissolve until the 1970s. But it became less and less popular. And after a while, it just kind of lost its credibility. Let me see if I can find a film of people disrupting them. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I'll put on. This is from the film Operation Abolition. It was a film put out to expose the communist plot to shut down the House Un-American Activities Committee. But it just showed when they went to Berkeley, California, when they went to Oakland to investigate, peace activists in Oakland, the people just made fools out of them. They just disrupted their proceedings, and it was very powerful. Let me see if I can show a couple clips of that. But so in order to maintain their credibility, the House Un-American Activities Committee investigated the Ku Klux Klan in 1965, and their leader, Robert Shelton, was told to turn over all their membership rolls and tell who all their members were. He refused to do it, and so he went to prison for a year. And at the time, the FBI estimated that there were about 30,000 Ku Klux Klan members in the South at the time. Now, what's interesting is in the early 60s, as part of the blowback against McCarthyism, right? McCarthyism was seen as kind of a threat to the power structure in America. He had targeted the Rockefellers. He'd gone after Voice of America and the CIA. There was a lot of publicity for right-wing extremism. That was something, it was usually the media had focused on communists as, dangerous subversives, but suddenly the media shifted to talking about right-wing extremists. And George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder of the American Nazi Party, he was going around the United States in a Nazi costume, and the media gave him a lot of attention because it fed a narrative that, oh, right-wing extremists are a threat. We got to oppose the right-wing extremists. And the investigation of the Ku Klux Klan in 1965 was largely it was about that. It was about the, the fact that right-wing extremism was a big focus of mainstream media at the time. And George Lincoln Rockwell and the Ku Klux Klan, they fit kind of a narrative that the media was spinning about right-wing extremism. But this is like people disrupting the House Un-American Activity.
And finally, salutarian suite. Chairman Edwin Willis issues another call for law and order in the hearing room.
That these hearings have been conducted in a dignified fashion. The only earthly reason why the people's door is not open is this.
Officers chanting, "Abolish the committee, we shall not be moved," lyrics to which are lifted from the old Communist People's Songbook. Demonstrations in the hallways of City Hall become so loud that the judges in their chambers on the 3rd floor are unable to continue court procedures. During the morning, the judges give orders to the sheriff and police officials to remove the demonstrators from City Hall immediately. As pamphlets continue to be distributed among the demonstrators, police officials once again warn the students and agitators involved that they must be quiet or the orders of the judges will be enforced. The police warnings are met with jeers and boos and renewed chanting and renewed singing. Finally, during the noon lunch and recess, the judges in their chambers give official orders now to remove the demonstrators from City Hall. When an attempt is made to carry out the order, the crowd responds by throwing shoes and jostling the police officers. When one officer warns that fire hoses will have to be used if the crowd does not disperse, the demonstrators become more and more unruly. One student provides the spark that touches off the violence when he leaps over a barricade, grabs a police officer's knife, and begins beating the officer over the head. As the mob surges forward to storm the doors, a police inspector orders that the fire hoses be turned on. At this point, leaders of the group give orders to resist police enforcement. The crowd, now in open defiance of law and order, begins singing once again, "We shall not be moved." Riot squad police reinforcements arrive on the scene and are met by boos and jeers from the rioters. The communist agitators give new orders now to the students to sit down with their backs to the fire hoses and put their hands in their pockets after interlocking arms in what is described later by student newspapers as non-violent resistance. Police, enforcing judicial orders to remove the demonstrators from the building, take the defiant students one by the feet and slide them down the wetted marble stairs of City Hall.
That was 1960, where people were protesting the House Un-American Activities Committee. The House Un-American Activities Committee is becoming less and less popular, and so people are protesting it, etc. So to maintain their credibility, they start investigating the Ku Klux Klan, and Robert Shelton goes to prison for a year. FBI says they have about 30,000 members. And so then now I maintain that there is a fourth Ku Klux Klan. Now, this is where people will disagree with me. This is not what you'll read on Wikipedia or read in any history, but I maintain that there is a fourth Ku Klux Klan, that what David Duke did in the 1970s is very, very different than what went on before. So keep in mind, that was in the lead up to the, the 1968-69 political crisis. You had the civil rights movement. You had the Klan groups being formed against it, Robert Shelton, others. Well, 1974, a new Ku Klux Klan organization was formed. You have to talk about David Duke, right? David Duke. Now, David Duke's father, David Duke lives in Louisiana, and his father is a CIA guy. And that is not disputed. That is like his father worked for USAID and was an Air America pilot. During the Vietnam War, Air America was this airline that was used by the CIA to drop propaganda over Vietnam. And David Duke's father flew planes for the CIA, and his official paycheck came from USAID. He was an intelligence officer. David Duke's father was a CIA guy. Yes, David Duke is a Fed and has always been one, I maintain. And David Duke's father was a CIA guy. And when David Duke was 16 years old, his father basically divorced his mother and split up and left the country to do CIA work in another part of the country. And it looks like the young David Duke had a little bit of a, that's a disturbing thing, to lose your father at a young age. And it looks like the young David Duke, his mother was an alcoholic, had a very severe drinking problem. And, his father said, I'm done with this. And his father left the country and moved to Laos to get away from his mother, divorced his mother. And David Duke is 16 years old. And, he's dealing with a stressful situation, it looks like. And at the age of 16, right as his father leaves, he starts getting obsessed with racism as a young man. And he joins the White Citizens Council in Louisiana, and he's a teenage volunteer for the White Citizens Council. People speculate he's probably responding to turmoil in his household, but whatever. And he ends up going to the University of Louisiana. And as a student at the University of Louisiana, he discovers that he can get lots of attention for himself by dressing in a sheet. And putting on a Ku Klux Klan costume and doing theatrically racist stuff, to get attention for himself. When William Kunstler, the leftist lawyer, comes to the University of Louisiana, he dresses in a Nazi costume with a Nazi armband, and he carries a sign that says "Kunstler to the gas chamber." And he wears Ku Klux Klan outfits and is getting lots of attention in the media for being racist. And as a student at the University of Louisiana, he decides to start his own Ku Klux Klan group in 1974. He founds the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And the other Klan groups all denounce him, and they say, who are you? You're not part of us. You can't do this. But mainstream media makes David Duke an instant celebrity. And that is the thing you need to remember. Mainstream media immediately picked up David Duke and made him a household name. He's just a college kid who's racist. But yet, and that's totally true. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but he's just this college kid who's racist and, puts on silly costumes at his college campus and does racist stuff. And he starts his own KKK, and mainstream media, he's on Phil Donahue shows. He's on every late night talk show. He becomes a household name immediately. They make him famous, right? I'll show a clip of him on the Phil Donahue show. The mainstream media, just made him very, very famous immediately. And I think that has a lot to do with his father. I think it has a lot to do with his father and his connections. I think more than anything. But here, I'll show you a clip of him on the Donahue show. 1978. This is national television, right? And look at what Phil Donahue. I really respect Phil Donahue in a lot of ways, but this was not his best moment. But this kind of shows you the media treatment David Duke was getting. He was on every channel, every radio talk show, everything. It was like out of the blue. They just decided that they were gonna make this young guy who was not connected to any other KKK group. They were going to make him the face of the Klan. And they put him on national television and they made him very, very famous. And this is Phil Donahue, 1978.
Duke. Mr. Duke is, what is your title?
Grand Wizard or National Director.
You are Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
He's such a nice-looking boy.
That's a nice looking boy. Is that what you would say to the leader of an organization that kills and murders people? I mean, you know, such a nice looking boy.
You know what I mean. I don't mean to be flip about what
I know.
People are surprised, huh?
I guess so, because Hollywood's got this image that anybody who believes in their own race, if they're white and wants to preserve it and have their children go to decent schools and grow up believing in this country, they've got to somehow be old, they got to have a big beer belly, they got to be dirty, and I don't think that's the right image.
You don't even chew tobacco, huh, Mr. Duke?
No, a little spearmint juicy fruit once in a while.
Yeah, and like those are the kind of interviews David Duke gives, where he's just like, I just love my own race, and you know, and they just make him a national celebrity. I mean, and keep in mind there are KKK groups that have been around. You know, he has nothing to do with any of them. He's just some guy who's, you know, dad happens to be a CIA agent, and suddenly they make David Duke a national celebrity. Should ring some bells. Anyway. 1979, people associated with David Duke's KKK, they murder 3 members of the Communist Workers' Party, right? There's a Maoist communist group in North Carolina, and they have a Death to the Klan rally, and the KKK shows up and shoots 5 of them on live television. And I actually have a video about the Greensboro massacre. Let me see if I can show that. I know there's been times where they've muted it, but let me see if I can... you know, it's a really horrendous incident. Yeah, I think, this video is live. So yeah, I mean, you know, there's some, the music I chose for it is copyrighted, but I guess it's just kind of a matter of the music being shared. So yeah, I'll show this video about the Greensboro massacre, a really horrendous event in 1979.
could have happened in any city, Raleigh, Durham, Wilmington, Gastonia, North. If they'd have put that poster out in any city they went in, we would have been there and it probably happened. But they chose Greensboro. They chose it, and we went. They should shut up crying, griping.
Yeah, so kind of a follow-up on that incident, the Greensboro massacre. I've actually been to the site of the Greensboro massacre. I made a point of wanting to actually visit the site because it was such a big incident. It was an important moment in the history of the new communist movement. I've actually written, I have my book on the history of the new communist movement, and it's covered in the book. It's an important moment. One thing about the Greensboro massacre that is interesting is that you had two organizations, the Communist Workers' Party, which were Maoist communists, and the Ku Klux Klan, which was white supremacist. And what was interesting is, so both organizations were basically captured by the establishment as a result of this horrendous incident. And it's very bizarre, but like, for example, this guy, this is one of the people who was in the cars. It's not proven he was one of the shooters, but one of the individuals who was one of the Klansmen who was in the Klan caravan at the Greensboro massacre was this guy, Glenn Miller Cross. Now, the reason that there's a picture of him there in handcuffs is when he was in his late 70s, he was living in Kansas, and he shot up a Jewish community center, and he killed a number of people. He did a mass shooting. At his trial, it was revealed that he had several different names and several different social security numbers. And that was because after the Greensboro massacre, the FBI had put him in the witness protection program. And it appears that Glenn Miller, he, in addition to being a Ku Klux Klansman, he basically became a Fed after the Greensboro massacre. And that he said, well, I was convinced that the communists were going to kill me, and the Feds recruited him. And he was an informant, an FBI informant in the white supremacist movement. And the FBI gave him protection, gave him fake names and all of that. And he was still a white supremacist. And I guess he then shot up a Jewish community center in 2014 and killed a number of people. How many people did he kill? He killed 6 people when he shot up the Jewish community center in Kansas. He was sentenced to death, but he didn't end up getting the death penalty because he died in prison. But it appears he was an FBI informant for almost his entire life. And that he was cooperating with the Feds. You look at this Klan guy was a Fed, and he had multiple names, and he'd been in the caravan that had done the Greensboro massacre. In addition to that, the Communist Workers' Party, the organization that was victimized by the Klan, the CWP, they kind of lost their minds in response to the Greensboro massacre also. And they started, obsessing with the Ku Klux Klan and such, and they started protesting against Noam Chomsky for allegedly being anti-Semitic. And they kind of started supporting Israel. Not really supporting Israel, but saying that people criticizing Israel were Klansmen and were white supremacists. And then in 1984, they ultimately dissolved and became part of the Democratic Party. They became the New Democratic Movement. And now, actually, there's a woman who was on the New York City Council for many years, who was a former member of the Communist Workers' Party. And she's a Zionist, and she's just a regular Zionist Democrat, Margaret Chin. And she, started out in the Communist Workers' Party. And then the Communist Workers' Party got targeted by the Klan. And then the Communist Workers' Party started obsessively going after right-wing anti-Zionists and going after even Noam Chomsky and leftists for allegedly being anti-Semitic. And they dissolved. And now, the mayor of Oakland, California for many years was a woman named Jean Quan. And she was also a former member of the Communist Workers' Party. And, but she, is just a regular Zionist Democrat now. And I guess both the Klansmen who did the shooting, a lot of them became feds, at least Glenn Miller did. And a lot of the communists who were victims of the shooting also just became mainstream liberals. And that this is something that I want to get back to as kind of a theme of what I'm noticing in relation to the Ku Klux Klan as we go through American history. But yeah, 1979, you had the Greensboro Massacre. What was weird is also in 1979, David Duke became a supporter of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Which is a very weird thing because, in America at the time, part of the Reagan revolution at the time was hating Iran. The USA was shifting to the right? Ronald Reagan won the 1980 election in a landslide, and part of the, make America great again right-wing rhetoric was hating Iran. But David Duke liked Iran. And David Duke thought Iran was having a revolution against the Zionists, and David Duke liked Iran. And that's very, very strange. And that at the same time that David Duke was building this KKK group, he was also trying to infiltrate anti-Zionist spaces. There's, you can see pictures of him, talking about, Israel out of Lebanon and stuff like that. One thing that David Duke's KKK did, and this is testimony that's been given, is that they had a whole section of their organization called COINTELPRO. And what they did is they made comic books about killing police officers and killing white people. And they distributed them in the black community. And they were comic books, about, killing the police, killing white people, race war comic books that they distributed. And they had phone numbers that if you want to get more involved in this, you can call this number. And they would collect the information from the black people that would call the number and turn it over to the FBI. And that they were trying to help the FBI categorize and track the most radical black people in America. And that was part of what they were doing, which I think is a fascinating thing. It was PBS, they revealed this, that I guess David Duke was cooperating with the FBI and going into black neighborhoods and distributing what looked like revolutionary black literature, collecting people's information and turning it over to the FBI. And that, doing free work for the FBI was probably a way to try and get the FBI to trust you, to get the FBI to not persecute you, or something. And, we know David Duke's father was an intelligence officer, was, Air America, worked for USAID, etc. 1980, an audio tape surfaced of David Duke making fun of all the KKK members. And he then sold their names to a rival KKK leader who he knew was an FBI informant. Now, that is weird as hell. What is that, right? But he apparently, a tape surfaced, and he's sitting down with this other KKK leader of a rival KKK group. And together, they're just making fun of the members of the Klan and calling them fools and laughing at them. And he knows this other KKK guy is an FBI informant, and he gives him the membership lists. It's supposed to be secret who's in the Klan, but he sold it to him. The guy gave him money, and he sold him the name of the names of all his members. Very, very suspicious behavior. And that's ultimately why David Duke left the Ku Klux Klan and became a Republican. Was that, it seemed like this tape surfaced where all the KKK people hated him because it looked like he was not serious in what he was doing, and he was just, using them. So I want to now turn to, and, David Duke then became a Republican, and he's now kind of considered the face of white nationalist, white supremacist politics in America. But he always, if you ever bring up that he was in the Klan, he gets very defensive. He says, I quit the Klan years ago. And, he's still anti-Semitic. He's still, espouses claims that he's, part of the white race and is loyal to the white race. But he always gets very defensive if you ever bring up his membership in the Klan. And he's a Republican, and he ran for president as a Republican many times. He was in the Louisiana state legislature, and he ran for governor of Louisiana and almost won. He got about 60% of the white vote in Louisiana in the 1990s. But David Duke is a Fed. And he has been a Fed. It seems like this is a game the Feds play where they try to create their controlled version of what they consider to be a subversive movement. And I think that's the case. And we see examples of that in our time. I think there's people that sound kind of like David Duke, and there's people that sound like other kinds of politics that are considered subversive, where they find somebody who is an asset and they blow them up. They use mainstream media to blow them up and make them the face of this subversive movement as a way to use that subversive movement for deep state stuff, like David Duke was doing with COINTELPRO. Also as a way to, to supplant any elements that they can't control. And it looks like the feds, they wanted to use the Ku Klux Klan to fight the Communist Workers' Party. They wanted to use the Ku Klux Klan to maybe monitor people that supported the Islamic Revolution. They apparently wanted to use the Ku Klux Klan to monitor black radicals and others with their COINTELPRO operations. But they also wanted to make sure that whoever they gave the gig to as being the voice of the Klan in America, they wanted to make sure it was somebody they controlled. And it looks like the feds created David Duke. They couldn't control these other Klan guys that were just doing what they wanted. So David Duke was created kind of artificially as the deep state's Klan guy that they could use to try and control white supremacist politics in America. And there's another example of this. There was another guy who did this, after David Duke kind of went out of credibility. There was a guy named Hal Turner. I don't know if people remember Hal Turner. Hal Turner was a white supremacist who had a racist radio show and such. And he threatened a number of elected officials on the air, including a friend of mine, Cynthia McKinney. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney is a great anti-imperialist. He said all kinds of racist, nasty stuff about her and called for her to be killed and all kinds of stuff. And Hal Turner, he broke the law. He threatened a judge. And after he threatened a judge, he was arrested for threatening a judge. And at his trial, it also came out that Hal Turner was a Fed. Hal Turner was not just some guy who was racist. The feds created Hal Turner. He was an FBI guy that they decided to make a famous white supremacist on the internet. And they did CNN segments promoting him, and they did all kinds of stuff to make him more well-known. And it turned out he was also an FBI informant, and he was a creation of the feds. And that, there was this whole CNN segment about, meet the new voice of white supremacy, Hal Turner. Well, turns out he was a Fed, and he threatened Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney was forced out of Congress for her anti-imperialism. And it looks like the guy who was threatening her life, while she was a member of Congress, was a KKK white supremacist guy who was a Fed. So it's pretty wild how the feds work. But I want to talk about this incident in 1982. I knew some people that were involved in this incident in 1982, and it's very interesting. And this shows you how the deep state works. I was looking over the details of this incident as I was preparing the slideshow today, and I couldn't get over. This is a moment we need to learn from, especially now in light of the Palestine movement and everything. November 29th coalition. So in 1982, on November 29th, which is the day that the Nakba happened, that Israel was created, there was going to be a major pro-Palestinian rally in Washington, D.C. And many communist groups were involved. IRA supporting groups, Irish freedom groups were involved. Haitian American groups were involved. It was going to be like one of the first major rallies for Palestine in Washington, D.C. In 1982, being pro-Palestine was not a popular thing among leftists. It was kind of a taboo issue on the left. But the Workers' World Party and some of the other communist groups got together with the Arab American community. November 29th, 1982, they were going to have a rally in Washington, D.C. to support Palestine. And then the Ku Klux Klan announced a major rally on the same day, several blocks away. Very sketch. Very, very sketch. And so then the communist groups shifted all their focus onto opposing the Klan. And so, the rally turned into an anti-Klan rally, of course, right? And all the communist groups came to Washington, D.C., the Spartacist League and the Workers' World Party and the Progressive Labor Party, and all the communist groups were there. And the black community came out in big numbers. And there was rioting all over Washington, D.C. It was the anti-Klan riot of 1982, but it was very sketch how it happened. It was supposed to be a pro-Palestine event, and then the Klan showed up, and then it turned into an anti-Klan event, and everyone kind of forgot about the pro-Palestine thing. And the communists were there, and they had their permits to protest the Klan, and the black community came out in big numbers, and the black community was tear gassed. 38 people were arrested. All kinds of businesses were destroyed. Rioting went on until late into the night. I mean, D.C. went up in flames in 1982, the anti-Klan riot. It's very interesting. Very, very interesting, right? All the Trotskyists and the Maoists, interestingly enough, yeah, very, very interesting. What happened? The 1982 Klan riot. What was supposed to be a major pro-Palestine event ended up being an anti-Klan riot. Now, this is a video from the Spartacist League of their participation. This is the only video I can find of it online, and it's highlighting the work of the Spartacist League, which is like kind of an Orthodox Trotskyist group that participates. They still brag about this as if they're responsible for everything that happened that day. I mean, I'm sure they had a lot of people, protesting and stuff, but the Workers' World Party, the All People's Congress, they did stuff. Progressive Labor Party, all kinds of groups were out in the streets. It was largely just the black community came out in big numbers to fight the Klan. But here we go. This is the Spartacist video of the anti-Klan riot of 1982 in Washington, D.C.
I want to trend right now. One that expresses exactly what we have to do to stop them. Smash the Nazis, smash the Klan, only workers' defense guards can. Smash the Nazis, smash the Klan, only workers' defense guards can. Smash the Nazis, smash the Klan, only workers' defense guards can. When we do that, we carry that out. You can bet those guys in white sheets are going to shake, run, and roll. That's how you want to get it. Roll the hell out of Washington. Okay, we got a speaker from UAW Local 100, Charles Dubois. Yeah! Let's go, Charles. Got to get rolling, baby.
That's Local 600. Here's from Local 100, CWU. That's all right. We're both unionists, and we're all together here. I guess you can call this provocation by the Klan their payback to Ronald Reagan. Or Ronald Reagan's payback to them, rather. See, they said that he could have wrote their program for them, and now he has threatened this demonstration with a massive show of police force. That's the payback for them, right? Thanks for his junior buddies. Well, it's very good people showed up out here because we ain't going for it. We've had unemployment before Reagan, it's gotten worse under Reagan. That's right. Now, it's very important to understand it's not just Republicans. The difference being that the Democratic Party, they act like they are friends, but when it comes down to it, the money's gone anyway, and the cops bust you upside the head anyway. The Republicans, they just tell you outright, I'm your enemy. I'm going to take your money. I'm going to bust your unions. I'm going to take away the welfare. They just say it outright. That's the only difference. Now, this thing that they say they're going to happen today, they're looking at it historically. They haven't done this thing since 1925. When they had about 40,000 Klansmen marching down this avenue. Right? They think it's their time. They think it's their time because their big man Ronald Reagan's in the White House. That's why it's very important people came out here today to show them this is our time. All right. That we haven't got to take this kind of crap from Ronald Reagan's junior buddy. He might be in the damn White House, but it's demonstrations like this that are focused and centralized on labor. That are centralized on labor that can not only stop the goddamn Klan, but can take that strutting cowboy in the White House and bring him down. That's what's needed in this country is labor action to bring down Ronald Reagan. One year ago, you had Solidarity Day in Washington. There are 500,000 people that are shooting out here today. But what do we got from our union leaders? Right? They don't want to organize the people to do the right kind of thing. To stop this unemployment, to stop the plant closing. What we need is that good old-time class struggle, right? Self-defense against the Klan, self-defense against the Nazis, and sit-down strikes which form the union. Militant action. You ain't never got something for nothing. That's why everybody come out here from Detroit, where I'm from Norfolk, Virginia, from Boston, everything we've gotten takes sacrifice. And that's why it's very important people come down here, took the day off, spent some money and came down here because whatever we're going to get, we're going to fight for. And the Klan knows that, and they think that we're down on the ground, but we're not. This demonstration proves that, and we'll show them. We'll show them today, we'll show Ronald Reagan today what we're really about.
This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. Smash the Klan. This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. Smash the Klan. This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. Smash the Klan. This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. Smash the Klan. This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. Smash the Klan. This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. Smash the Klan. This is the hour. Slavery and blacks have got the power. All right. Let them know that we don't want them here. Smash the Klan! This is the hour! Labor and blacks have got the power! Greensboro, build a workers' party! More Greensboro, build a workers' party! More Greensboro, build a workers' party! The radio's saying they bust them over to the White House, but they didn't come here. They said they were going to march, but they didn't come here because we beat them back. 5 to finish the Civil War. 5, 6, 7, 8. To our working state. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 to finish the Civil War. 5, 6, 7, 8. Forward to our working state. 1, 2, 3.
That sign says, "Remember Greensboro," right? It says militants murdered by the KKK and the Nazis never again. Just FYI, we just talked about the Greensboro massacre. Yep. That was 1982, and that's the anti-Klan riot of 1982. And basically, the leftist rallies then facilitated the black community fighting the Klan and the police. An interesting incident. In the 80s and the 90s, Klan provocations became like regular activities in major cities. Every few years in a major city, the KKK would get a permit, and they would come, and it was usually like in a black neighborhood or someplace that was very provocative, at the Holocaust Museum, in front of a synagogue or something. And they would come and announce that they're going to have their rally. And then all the politicians would get on TV and say, oh, in America, we believe in free speech. Even the KKK can do their thing. All the communist groups would come out to oppose them. And an army of police would surround them. And the Klan would put on their silly costumes. Sometimes it was Nazis, sometimes it was Klan. And they would put on a show. And it was just kind of a media gimmick. And it was kind of a weird psyop of kind of that late Cold War normal that I talk about, of like, part of America was we have mainstream politicians, and then every so often the Klan has a rally that is widely publicized, and then all the communists come out and protest against the Klan. And I don't know, it was just a weird like psychological operation or something. It was just a very bizarre thing that happened throughout the 80s and 90s. I remember when I was a kid in Cleveland, I remember this happened. And they, it was like for weeks, the news was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan is going to have a rally. And oh my God, what are we going to do? And the city of Cleveland bought a tank just for the rally, just to prevent violence from the Klan being there. And, and all the mainstream Democrats said, stay home, don't protest. And all the leftists went there decked out, ready to fight the Klan, and ended up fighting with the police, not the Klan. And the whole thing was, and one aspect of that thing that many people have talked about that is a weird aspect of, and this happened in every city, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, New York, Chicago, Detroit, is every so often you'd have a Klan rally with 1 million cops around them. And, the media would be there and they would cover the leftists kind of fighting with the police. And they would cover the Klan, and there'd be like 5 Klansmen. There wouldn't be that many of them. What they didn't show was there was a layer of people who came to watch the Klan. And that was, I think, more important. And that was one thing that, I was at some of these rallies even back in the day. And especially I talked to older leftists who've been doing this. They said, you'd have the Klan cage where the Klansmen would be in their crazy costumes. And then you would have the leftists that would be countering them, right? And then there'd be this other cage where there'd be cops, prosecutors, kind of wealthier people, important, like well-connected people. Anybody couldn't just go to this other cage. And it would be prosecutors, criminal prosecutors, police officers, and others that would sit there and watch the Klan. And they didn't agree with the Klan, but they thought the Klan were funny and they hated black people. And I guess that becomes apparent. I did police brutality solidarity work in Cleveland. There's a layer of people that work in the courts, and Black Lives Matter, before Black Lives Matter, was a national issue. There's a layer of, cops, police officers, prosecutors, and maybe things have changed. I don't know. But in these days, in a lot of like mostly black cities, you had cops, prosecutors, judges who hated black people. And they thought the Klan were funny, and they thought the Klan were stupid hillbillies and fools. But they also kind of appreciated hearing someone say racist stuff. And that's an aspect of that kind of 1990s, the Klan is coming to downtown, that we don't often hear about. It gets overlooked in the media. You had a layer of like Klan fans, and that what the Klan did at those rallies, that's the other thing, is that the Klan was not there giving like eloquent speeches about their ideology. the Klan were almost stand-up comedians. There'd be 5 of them there in their hoods, and they'd be using racial slurs. They'd be telling offensive racial jokes. And it's kind of like that phenomenon where it's like people like Trump because he says he tells it like it is, like he says what they won't say. It was kind of like that. There was a layer of like prominent white people, who thought the Klan was entertaining, and appreciated the Klan being racist and offensive, and they didn't respect the Klan. They didn't think that the Klan guys were good people. They didn't think that they would never invite them over to their houses or anything like that. They thought the Klan were stupid fools, but they were like having fun at their expense, kind of. And also they liked the racism. They were kind of happy that someone was saying racist stuff. And that is a very, very odd aspect of American politics in the 80s and 90s. Was you had these kind of, in addition, you had this kind of psyop that went on in downtown America. But the other thing that happened during these years, there's 2 other developments that happened in relation to the Klan. One was you had the Southern Poverty Law Center that came into existence, and they were just a huge nonprofit that made money suing the Klan and taking the Klan to court and tracking the Klan. And, they started out that way. But I noticed, I got the Southern Poverty Law Center's emails. I noticed that around the time Obama got in, they started losing their minds. And it got up to the point they started attacking. They attacked Max Blumenthal. They ran smear pieces. Luckily, they've never gone after me by name, thank God. But they published stuff by Alex Reed Ross, the Mossad operative, the DSA guy who has attacked me. And they just they really quickly deteriorated. They started off as a group that sued the Klan, for their links to hate groups, etc. But it got to the point that they just kind of started going after Republicans. I wrote an article, I remember, because I remember they sent an email out, and it was the top right-wing lies. One of them was FEMA camps. And they said that FEMA camps had, never existed. And I said, yeah, they did. The McCarran Internal Security Act. Those camps were created for communists. And and that there were so many examples of them lying to defend the status quo rather than telling the interesting story about, like there were FEMA camps. There were camps created. The Japanese, when they were rounded up in World War II, where do you think they put them? They put them in camps, right? And after World War II, you had the McCarran Internal Security Act of 1951, which had a list of people, that would be put in camps. McCarran Internal Security Act of 1950, was to put Americans in camps, but it was communists. It wasn't Alex Jones fans. It wasn't gun owners. It was communists, right? That they were going to put in camps, right? And it was a real law. Why did the Southern Poverty Law Center not tell what the McCarran, and Alex Jones would be on his show talking about the McCarran Internal Security Act? Well, why did Southern Poverty Law Center not tell people about this law? If you want to debunk Alex Jones, say, yeah, this law exists and the target is communists. But they didn't do that. They said no such law ever existed. Well, all anyone has to do is go look up that this law existed. It actually did. So in a way, you're kind of helping, these far right people you don't like. And I would get their emails, and it just seemed like more and more they were just going after mainstream conservatives, and they were defending the status quo and not teaching anybody anything. They were just pandering. And so now the Southern Poverty Law Center has been indicted, and it appears they were paying Klansmen. That's what they're charged with, paying the Klan, because they needed publicity, and that, Charlottesville and all of that is part of the anti-Trump propaganda. And basically what's alleged is that the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is supposed to be fighting the Klan, was basically subsidizing and funding Klan activity in order to create a narrative against Donald Trump. And that's so sad and pathetic. I remember during these years, Antifa existed, but it wasn't, they only went after the Klan. They only went after Nazis. But now Antifa is a household word, and Antifa has gone after me and protested events that I did in Minneapolis. And Antifa goes after all kinds of people. It goes after anybody. I mean, it's been created as this entity that just kind of defends the liberal order and criticizes people who want peace with Russia. So we're in a strange time. The other thing, and this is kind of funny, and I don't hear this as much anymore. You still hear this from people like Dinesh D'Souza and others. the neocon line, the neoconservative line, which in a way it makes sense from a neocon perspective, is the Klan are liberals. Why? How are they liberals? Right? They believe in racial hierarchies. They're opposed to interracial marriage. They think there's a communist Jewish conspiracy. How are they liberals? Well, they're liberals because they're against the status quo. And they're against the status quo, and they're Democrats, right? And I mean, and Dinesh D'Souza writes whole books about, well, the Democrats are racist because they are Marxists. And just like Hitler was a Marxist, he was a National Socialist, and it's like, it's like the dumbest thing. If you know anything about politics, the Klan are not liberals, but they're not neocon Republicans. So they must therefore be Democrats. And in a way, like there's that neocon thing, and they equate all populism, all mass movements are the same, right? And the Klan, they were a mass movement, and they are against the status quo, against the government. So they can't be good conservatives. They must be on the left, right? And it gets kind of silly. The other thing about David Duke, so David Duke, he was in the California state, Senate, and all of this. After 9/11, he was briefly imprisoned. After 9/11, he was briefly imprisoned for mail fraud. And I think that was simply because of ties to Iran. And that's wrong. I mean, it's like you want to jail David Duke, jail him for being a racist, jail him for, being, a white supremacist, jail him for things the Klan did. But it seems like after 9/11, they went after him, and the mail fraud charge was bogus. And whenever they bring it up, he says, yeah, it's bogus. And it was, mail fraud is one of those charges. That's what they got Marcus Garvey for as well. And it's just, it's just mail fraud. If you send mass mailers out and there's like one thing in your mass mailer that's not true or debatable, they can get you for it or something. The other thing is, after he got out of prison, he went to Ukraine. He went to Ukraine and got his PhD in Ukraine. And that is unbelievable. David Duke is Dr. David Duke now because he went to Ukraine and started hanging out with the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And in fact, David Duke, one of his books, he's published The Secret Behind Communism. And it's all about how Stalin killed a gamillion people, and communism is all a plot by the Jews. And so the Jews are responsible for all the bad things of Stalin. And so I maintain David Duke is a fed. But I think that there's a lot that we can learn from all of this, right? I mean, this history is important. Obviously, the Klan is not a group any of us watching would ever want to associate with. But, it says a lot about America and American politics and how politics works. And the way 1982, a big Palestine march was turned into the DC anti-Klan riot. The way David Duke became the leader in the face of white supremacism, despite not being part of the movement, but having a CIA dad. A lot of things. There's a lot that you can learn from this history. And so that's why there's a lot of videos on YouTube going over the history of the Klan. But we bring with us a unique perspective of understanding history, differently, and bringing our innovationist views with us. So that's why I wanted to do this slideshow on the history of the Ku Klux Klan. It is almost midnight, and no one has sent any questions. No one has sent any questions. Now, there's one super chat. The algorithms are optimized to engagement, not rational explanations. Posts about dry lightning hitting the water tower. Okay, I appreciate that, Jones, but no one sent me any questions. And it's almost midnight. I guess we'll do the roll call. I'll put on some music, and if anyone has any questions, I'll answer that after that. If not, I'm going to bed. So names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Anybody with us tonight? Names and locations. Anybody? Ryan in Kansas City, Cameron in New Hampshire, Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Names and locations. Yusuf in North Carolina. Good to see you, Yusuf. Jack in Arizona, Jenny in Cincinnati, Liverpool, UK. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Alex in Brazil. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. JT24 in Mississippi. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Alex in Sherman Oaks, California. Good to see you. Good to see you. Alex, good to see you. Los Angeles, Bradley Briggs, good to see you. Are you going to come to our event? I'm coming to your state. I'm coming to your city. July, I'm heading around the country. In July, I am going to be in Minneapolis, LA, and New York City. Yeah. John Hoban in Tipperary. Sorry, Caleb, just tuned in. D in Virginia. Good to see you, D. But yeah, in July, I'm going to be in New York, I'm going to be in Minneapolis, and I'm going to be in Los Angeles. So it'd be great to see you. Tobias in Norway just woke up. Very good. All right. So if anyone has any questions, now is the time to send them. Now is the time to send them. The best way to send them is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. You can also do super chats, and you can also do Rumble rants. If any Rumble rants come in, no Rumble rants. But yeah, any questions that people have, now would be the time to send them. I will put on a song while I give you all a chance to send questions. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin, and I will send any questions. I will answer people's questions. But yeah, I'm here to answer your questions in the second half of the show. So let me put on some music. What music shall we put on? We'll do some music. What music shall we put on? What music would be good to put on? All right. I'm just going to figure out. Please send some questions. Give me something to talk about here in the second half of the show before I go to bed. All righty. What should I put on? What should I put on that I haven't played on here like a million times? I guess I'll put on the Skyboat song of Bonnie Prince Charlie.
It is a black, wild night, with the wind howling down from the North Minch, whipping the seas separating Skye from the mainland into a cauldron of angry waves. An occasional flash of lightning reveals a tiny rowing boat, bobbing like a cork, sometimes lost in the deep troughs of black-green water, but always reappearing on the crest of a gigantic white-feathered wave. In this tiny craft, struggling against the elements and fleeing from the Duke of Cumberland and Culloden, is Prince Charles Edward Stuart.
Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Loud the winds howl, loud the waves roar, thunderclaps rend the air. Baffled our foes stand by the shore, follow they will not dare. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Though the waves leap, soft shall ye sleep, ocean's a royal bed. Rocked in the deep, Flora will keep watch by your weary head. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Many's the lad fought on that day, well the claymore could wield. When the night came, silently lay, dead on Culloden's field. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Burned are our homes, exile and death scatter the loyal men. Yet ere the sword cool in its sheath, Charlie will come again. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Over the sea to sky.
Yeah, some good Scottish music, some classic Scottish folk music. But let's see if we can play something a little more rousing. We can play an Irish Gaelic song. Here we go.
Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Nishar Haptantare, Shilova Avambale, the Bea Gratu Vei, the Hungara, Eselim Migras until Talesh Nagara, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Nishar Haptantare, Tagamya Wela, Jaktar Sala, Ole Armale Margarda, Geri Hames, Nigana, Spanais, Kurshi, Ruyargada, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Nishar Haptantare, Avila Rina, Vartko Vekin, Muna Megiore, Nayea, Shapten, Grania, Wela, Gasmira, Gashtar, Volod, Fadar, Dara, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Nishar Haptantare, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia, Oro Shilova Owalia,
All right. Well, yeah, while you all are thinking, if you have any more questions to send me, the best way to send them is to go to buymeacoffee.com. I did want to just, I'm going to put the whole thing on later this week. But I went on Kim Iverson and I just want to show you, they did a really, really great introduction. So I'm going to show you like the first little bit of my appearance on Kim Iverson. So it just says no audio, does it? God damn it. downloading clips can be a difficult thing to do. I thought that I could download that, but it doesn't have any audio. Well, why don't I put on another song while I find a way to download the Kim Iverson appearance that has audio. So yeah, we'll put on another song and then I'll show the Kim Iverson. But yeah, if anyone could send any questions, that'd be great. Give me something to talk about, please. buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin is the best way to send a question. But yeah, why don't we put on, we'll put on Shining Fatherland, a song for reunifying Korea.
Sunlight beaming forth in the east from the fatherland, bringing tidings of a new world to families in the field. Let us hasten to send the news all throughout the world. Eden's glory spreading forever, the hope of joy and peace. Oh, dawn golden, dawn throughout the shining fatherland, tells the tidings of the rising sun that brings us light. Harvest quickly, men of the fields, hasten to harvest now. Crops are ripened and ready to bring into the heavenly barn. Saints and angels and heavenly hosts gather to speed the task. All will share the harvest of joy at the banquet of our Lord. Oh, dawn golden, dawn throughout the shining fatherland, tells the tidings of the rising sun that brings us light. When the walls of 6,000 years are gone from the Father's heart, sons and daughters shall live with great joy, our true parents' own. Saints and sages and men of good faith all waited for this day. Loyal men of hope and fidelity yearn to see this day. Oh, dawn golden, dawn throughout the shining fatherland, tells the tidings of the rising sun that brings us light. Oh, dawn golden, dawn throughout the shining fatherland, tells the tidings of the rising sun that brings us light.
All right. So As I've said before, if you do have any questions, now would be the time to send them. So far, the only super chat, the only question we've gotten is algorithms are optimized. So I appreciate that. But yeah, if you could send a question, the best way to send your question would go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. Yeah, send in your questions. You can do Rumble rants. You can cash at me at 22, or you can just do a super chat. But yeah, give me something to talk about. So I went on Kim Iverson's show yesterday, and I'm going to show you a little bit of it because she did a really good introduction for me. And I thought the conversation ended up going in some wild places. Here we go.
Welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very interesting show for you tonight. We're joined by the ever interesting, very intelligent Caleb Maupin. He is a journalist, political commentator, and author of a brand new book called Imperialism and Anti-Imperialism. And when I first started flipping through this book, what struck me wasn't necessarily that I agreed with everything in it. In fact, there's plenty of things here that I think people are going to want to challenge. But what I found interesting is that Caleb is trying to answer some really big questions that a lot of us have been wrestling with lately. And what makes the book interesting is that it's not just a collection of Caleb's thoughts on world events. Much of it is drawn from his own experiences over the years, covering international politics, organizing anti-war movements, traveling abroad, questioning U.S. government officials, speaking in countries like Iran, interacting with world leaders, including Vladimir Putin, and even having one of his articles republished in North Korea's state newspaper. Through those experiences, Caleb explores some of the biggest geopolitical questions of our time, from China and Russia to Ukraine, NATO, energy markets, sanctions, and the shifting balance of power in an increasingly multipolar world. And whether you agree with his conclusions or not, he has a very different framework for understanding what's happening in the world right now than what we hear on CNN, Fox News, or most of the mainstream press. So today, we're going to talk about who actually has power in the West. Is it the elected politicians? Is it the corporations? Is it financial institutions? Is it something else entirely? You might be surprised by his answers, because if politicians aren't really driving the bus, then who is? Also, we're going to talk about the countries that are often presented as alternatives to the Western system. You're always hearing about them: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Are these countries genuinely building something better? That is the big question. Is the alternative that they present going to lead to a better world? And finally, you know what? Let's actually talk about the fix, because a lot of times all we do is bitch and complain and say, this is broken, this is bad, this is terrible. Well, how do we fix it? Let's say we give Caleb a magic wand and he could reshape American policy tomorrow. What would he actually do? What does the future look like beyond simply criticizing the system that we have right now? That and more is coming up here on The Kim Iverson Show. Have you ever looked yourself up online? What's shocking is how much.
Skipping through the ad.
Caleb, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure, glad to be here.
All right, Caleb Maupin, you always, you always stir the pot a little bit. People love having you on the show, by the way. I always get a lot of positive feedback whenever you're on. They say, this guy is so smart. Caleb Maupin is so smart. And you've written an interesting book, an interesting new book. What number, by the way, is this book? You seem to crank out books faster than anybody I know.
Yeah, well, I have
What
a lot of
number
like
is
little pamphlet-sized books that I put out of like pieces I've done or little studies, but this is a full-length piece, and this is a lot of talks I've given over the years. This is a lot of articles I've published. It goes back to like 2015 when I wrote an article that was published in North Korea's daily newspaper. It's got, a talk I gave in Brazil about oil price manipulation. It's got my interaction with President Putin, and it's got all kinds of stuff for over the years. It's a compilation that the organization, the Center for Political Innovation, we decided we wanted to put something together. It was like one big volume that kind of gave an expression of what we're all about and the vision that we put forward. So that's why we published this. This is a little bit different than some of the little pamphlets I have on kind of niche historical topics, et cetera.
Okay. Well, we are going to get into, how you do envision the world and how you would like to see the world. But I want to first start off with when I thumbed through the book, you and also our previous conversations, you really divide the world into two camps. And I think a lot of people are dividing the world into the two camps. We've got the Western world, right? And then we have and the Western world is centered on Wall Street, London, NATO, sanctions, imperialism, right? Like Western imperialism, the Western bloc, right? And then the other camp is this emerging bloc of countries. That would be China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela. These are countries that have historically defied the United States. They've been under heavy sanctions pressures from the West, a lot of pressure to change and cave into the Western way of life and or in the Western worldview. And they've just refused to really do that. So there's this emerging bloc of countries. And I guess the question is, first of all, because the politicians seem to be making the same exact decisions. It doesn't matter if it's Democrats or Republicans running the show, right? It doesn't matter when we switch presidents. People thought they were getting something different when they voted for Donald Trump. I mean, a lot of people really hoped, I myself included, really hoped that we would see some serious change. And instead, we got more of the same. We really got more of the same. So I guess the question is, to start off, is who really runs this Western bloc of countries, this Western imperialism? Who's really running it?
Sorry, I had an alarm go off there. So, yeah.
So who really runs this Western bloc of countries, would you say?
I think we need to look into some of what's been written over the years. Carroll Quigley, who was a mentor to Bill Clinton, he wrote about the Anglo-American establishment. And this was in the 1950s and 60s. He wrote a lot about how within the rich and powerful in the United States, there was one particular entrenched interest that was tied in with Britain, that was tied in with some of the wealthy oil money in New England. He wrote about that. There's other things that have been written. Carl Oglesby wrote a very good book called The Yankee and Cowboy War that gets into this and kind of the divisions among the American elite. But when it really gets down to it, every year, I think Forbes magazine publishes a list of the richest people in the world. And I would say that list is utter nonsense, because all the people on that list are so poor that they have to keep their money in their own name, right? I mean, Bill Gates and Carlos Slim and people like that, they're not the ones that really have the power. But if you look at like the Rockefellers, that's one of these old New England oil banking dynasties, goes back to John D. Rockefeller of ExxonMobil. They have more money than anyone can calculate. During the 1970s, one of them was being appointed and confirmed by Congress, and the press all tried to investigate how much money they actually had, and they couldn't figure it out. It was so wrapped up in so many different trusts and foundations and different estates, and they don't even know how much money they have. And the people who really run the West, I would say, are, you can call them the New England establishment, the Eastern establishment, the Anglo-American establishment. It is a group of very, very wealthy people that are tied in with Britain, that are tied in with the British Empire and their perspective. And the outlook that they have, which is a very important thing to understand, is they believe growth is bad. They believe in overpopulation. They believe there are too many people in the world, and they believe we desperately need to stop economic growth. And the reason they believe that is because they want to be at the top. And if the world continues to grow, they're going to lose their place. And that is their perspective. And the difference between the Western world that is dominated by these forces and the countries that have broken out of Western domination is the question of growth. And that, if you talk about communism, you're kind of missing the point. The point of so many of the revolutions of the 20th century was these were poor countries that wanted to have economic growth. They wanted to raise themselves up, and being under the domination of Wall Street and London wasn't going to enable them to do that. So they had revolutions to have growth. And now many of the countries that are, in this oppositional camp, the countries, they're not really communist in their ideology, so to speak, right? Iran is, it's Islamic revolutionary ideology. They disagree with Marxism vehemently. Some of them, there's a Marxist influence, like Venezuela, the Bolivarian Revolution. But the essence of what they want is economic growth, whereas the West is led by ultra monopolies that have determined that growth is bad and we cannot have economic growth. And that's because they want to stay at the top indefinitely. And those folks are tied in with oil, right? The world runs on oil. You get on a plane, you drive a car, that's oil. Any plastic that you have, that's oil. A lot of our electric.
Well, anyhow, you can watch the rest of that on Kim Iverson's YouTube channel, on Rumble. You can watch the whole episode. It was great. It was really great to do. And yeah, there were people debating my shirt in her chat, and some thought it was an African shirt. Some thought it was a Russian or Ukrainian shirt. It's actually a Guatemalan shirt that my wife's sister gave to me. Every time my wife's sister comes and visits me, she always brings me shirts, and she knows that I like those shirts without collars on them. So I've got a couple of them now. I've got a couple of those nice shirts without collars on them, and they're Guatemalan. They're not Russian. They're not African. They are Guatemalan. So in case there's any further debate about my shirts. So we do have a question that has come in, and I guess I'll answer it and then I'll say goodnight. I'm curious as to the capacity or significance of George Lincoln Rockwell's collaborations with the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam. He never collaborated with the Black Panthers, from what I understand, only the Nation of Islam. What happened was the Nation of Islam very much believed that interracial dating, interracial marriage was not a good thing. And also the Nation of Islam very much believed in separate, the idea of separatism, right? And the idea that, certain territories should be given to Black people to be separate. They want to promote Black businesses. They want to be separate. They emphasize separation. And George Lincoln Rockwell believed in the same thing. And there was, in the early 60s, there was a Nation of Islam gathering where George Lincoln Rockwell was on the stage, and that's it. That's all there is to it. I mean, there's not much more to it than that. The Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad did bring George Lincoln Rockwell onto the stage at one of their events, and he got booed, from what I understand. The Black audience didn't particularly like him. But the Nation of Islam has a nationalist ideology, and George Lincoln Rockwell has also got a nationalist ideology. And there was a feeling that they had something in common. They didn't trust white liberals, etc. But the Black Panthers never collaborated with George Lincoln Rockwell. First of all, George Lincoln Rockwell, I believe, was murdered in 1968. And the Black Panthers weren't even formed until 1966. So it just doesn't even line up. So there's that. That's an important, point there. There was Marcus Garvey did sit down with the Klan because the Klan wanted Black people to be separate and, back to Africa movement. And there is Marcus Garvey, from what I understand, there was some overlap between him. He did have meetings with the Klan, but George Lincoln Rockwell, there was the Nation of Islam. There was like a brief thing where he was on the stage at one of their events, and that was that. There's not really much more to it than that. Muhammad Ali spoke at a Ku Klux Klan rally once, and he talks about it in a documentary because he was opposed to interracial marriage. And as a Black Muslim, he was kind of a famous athlete. He spoke at their rally, and he talked about that. So there's been a little bit of that over the years, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the Klan is responsible for the death of so many Black people, and that maybe their ideology says, separation, and there can be some overlap in the belief in separation, but there's never real collaboration between, Black revolutionaries and those kind of groups can't really collaborate with each other. So I mean, there might be moments where they say, oh, we want the same things for our people or that kind of thing. But other than that, there's never any real collaboration. That's something liberals make a big deal out of. And in particular, Zionists. Zionists, if you really listen to Zionists, they believe that all anti-imperialist movements are all a plot to kill the Jews, right? That whenever I say capitalist or ruling class or imperialist, I secretly mean Jew. And whenever Black radicals say we want to fight for our people, they really mean they want to kill the Jews. And that whenever, that everything is secretly a plot to kill the Jews, left, right, center, right? Because deep down, all of us Gentiles are bloodthirsty, Jew-hating neo-Nazis, and we all just want to kill the Jews. And that, and Karl Marx wrote about capitalism, he just meant Jew. And, and when Donald Trump rants against immigrants, he just means Jew. And, that's the Zionist worldview, that everything is a big plot against them. They are the eternal victims, even though it's impossible to criticize them on mainstream television. They're the eternal victims, and the world has just been so unfair to the Jews. And because they're the eternal victims, that gives them the right to do whatever they want to the Palestinians. That gives them the right to lie about people and destroy their reputations. That gives them the right to, just whatever, because they're the eternal victims, right? That's a lesson for everybody, right? If you think of yourself as a victim, that gives you license to do bad things. Well, I'm a victim, right? Well, if you think of yourself as a victim, then suddenly you're giving yourself permission to harm other people, to do horrific things. The Nazis that killed millions of Jews did it because in their minds they were victims, and that making people believe they are victims might feel like an empowering thing, but often it is a way to gain power over somebody, right? Is that if someone comes along and gives you permission to feel like a victim, that is a way that they can gain power over you. And you feel like, wow, yes, I'm a victim. Yeah, they're gaining power over you. And that's something to keep in mind. It's something I've learned over the years. But anyway, and then how do you see the global conflict over the oil economy? Well, the main thing is we need to get beyond oil, but we can't get beyond it by going backwards. I think the ultra rich, oil scarcity is what big oil promotes, right? It's this idea we got to stay on oil. We just got to use less of it. And that's why a lot of environmental stuff is funded by big oil, because they want to create oil scarcity. And, but at the end of the day, we need fusion energy, right? And that, like Russia, part of the reason they hate Russia, it's a major oil exporting country. Part of the reason they hate, they hate Iran as a major oil exporting country. They hate Venezuela, right? Control of the oil markets and beating down competitors and maintaining a monopoly. That's a really big part of how imperialism operates in our time. That's why the big speech I gave in Brazil, "Oil and the Global Capitalist Crisis," is reprinted in the new book. So there you go. Wow. Now that I'm ready to go to bed, now everyone sends their questions, but that's okay. I will answer them. All right. So, all right, so we did that one, we did that one, we did that one. And the last one, also something that you could be a potential to Zionism in the far right, British Israelism is something that pops up on the far right. Yeah, I am one of those people who I like facts, right? So the Southern Poverty Law Center or one of these groups, they had a page that talked about Christian identity as a form of racism. And I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these people tweeting, "Oh my God, they're saying just being a Christian makes you racist." No, the Christian identity movement is British Israelism. That's what British Israelism calls itself in America. And I was just like, I don't want to defend the Southern Poverty Law Center. I don't want to defend the ADL, but they're not talking about all Christians. Most Christians don't believe in British Israelism. British Israelism is a particularly strange white supremacist ideology that most white supremacists don't believe in. It's kind of a weird spin-off that says that the Jews of the Bible are white people, and it was developed in I think it was popular in like the Victorian times. It was invented in Britain in like the 1800s, and it was like, well, actually, the people that call themselves Jews are imposters, and actually, it's whites that are the Jews. Most white supremacists don't believe that. The Nazis did not believe that. It's just, it's a very obscure thing. It's a very, very obscure white supremacist belief system, right? And that's one thing that is a little bit interesting. It's kind of similar to Black Hebrew Israelites. Black Hebrew Israelites maintain that Black people are the real Jews. And, it's like generally, the resentment people have against Jews is, well, they think they're the chosen people, et cetera. But there is a weird, trend of various people saying, well, we're actually the chosen people. We're the real Jews. And that's the Black Hebrew Israelites. You see them in New Jersey, New York City, and various other places. They set up on street corners, and they wear kind of unique costumes, and they start yelling about how the Bible says that Black people are actually the Jews. There's a lot of YouTube channels and stuff, Black Hebrew Israelites, and they maintain Black people are the real Jews, right? And British Israelism maintains Anglo people, white European English people are the real Jews. That's what that is. And it's a weird one. It's a weird one. But anyway, it's a strange one, but hey, people believe a lot of strange things in this world. And in America, generally British Israelists will call themselves Christian identity. I believe the Christian identity movement is what they call themselves. Anyhow, folks, I am going to say goodnight. I hope that people enjoyed the slideshow I did tonight. I just, I thought it was a topic I could talk about, something I know about, and, I could, bring an interesting perspective. It was kind of a risk. I mean, there's probably somebody out there who tuned in for 2 seconds and they said, aha, and they're going to tell all their friends, Caleb did a slideshow all about the Klan and how he loves the Klan. And it's like, I clearly don't love the Klan, but there's certain people that are out there to smear me. And that's, whatever. I noticed that, at one point that was happening. Like everything I did, there were certain people that would just try their hardest to take me out of context and make me look bad. And now that doesn't seem to be the approach. Now, wind is in our sails. We're getting a lot more views and attention now. So maybe that kind of thing will start happening again, or maybe not. I don't know. We just have to keep building our movement. Join us in Chicago. Come to our 7-day workshop. Get my new book. I'll be around the country, New York, Minneapolis, Los Angeles. We're building a movement, folks. We got to build the movement. That's the only way out of this is going to be a movement. So I hope that you will get involved in the Center for Political Innovation. We've got a lot to do, and dare to struggle, dare to win.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging.
Sorry, false start, false alarm. Check the coffee. A coffee came. I'm not a personal fan of Peter Thiel and Palantir, but I do find it odd that liberals in particular paint him as the big bad as opposed to the other more insidious billionaires and ruling class forces. Yeah, I mean, Peter Thiel is an individual. He's kind of like Elon Musk. He's just somebody, a billionaire who leans rightward, I guess, leans toward Trump. And that is one thing about liberals that I find annoying is they act like they're against imperialism. They act like they're against the ruling class. But then what happens is the liberal mainstream media that is pro-imperialist will pick out one little low-level capitalist for them to go after. And, there's an element of like they hate self-made men. They don't mind the Rockefellers who were born into their wealth. They hate, they hate low-level capitalists because they're so ruthless and they're so obsessed. And there's this like weird, I don't know. It's all weird. I mean, Peter Thiel, I don't know that much about him, but he's a wealthy guy who's tied to some of these far right movements, Trump supporter, right? Elon Musk, Elon Musk is messed up in a lot of ways. I'm not going to defend either of those people and act like they're great, but it is weird. It is obnoxious to see. I don't want to get caught up in red team versus blue team. I want to be real with you all, and I have a serious message. And I want people to learn something. And there's a lot of the politics now that because of social media, there's so much information being disseminated all the time. There's a lot of politics that doesn't teach you anything. It just is, a lot of the political messaging out there. It's just purely pandering to your prejudices. You already hate somebody. Well, I'm going to tell you to really hate them. And I aspire to wake people up and teach people things. And that is something that separates me from. So I understand what you're getting at. Huey Kingfish. I get what you're getting at. That, yeah, you hate, you always hate the billionaires on the other side. And, George Soros is a communist, of course, even though he toppled various Marxist-Leninist governments. But he has to be a communist because he's bad. It's the same kind of, that's something we hear from the right. And on the left, it's like the only bad billionaire is Peter Thiel, and the only bad billionaire is the Koch brothers. And, I don't know. You get what I'm saying.
Throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.